Millionaire CEO in the elevator receives an accidental hug from a girl and discovers true love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. It all started on a Monday morning, in one of the most imposing skyscrapers in the heart of the city. The rush hour crowd flowed through the lobby like a steady stream, men and women in impeccable suits scurrying to the elevators, phones in hand and tension etched on their faces. Among them, unnoticed by most, was Natalie, a recent college graduate juggling a worn purse and a chaotic stack of resumes as she fought the wave of bustling professionals. Her dark, shoulder-length hair was slightly messy from the brisk wind outside, and her cheeks were flushed with worry. Today was her last chance to secure any sort of office job before her savings completely vanished. Perhaps she could be an assistant, a receptionist, anything that might finally allow her to pay rent on time. She stepped into the enormous, marble-floored lobby, gazing up at the high ceiling while the mesmerizing pattern of glass and steel seemed to reflect a world where success was currency and status, the ultimate goal. A subtle tremor coursed through Natalie as she clutched her resumes. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Just act professional. One foot in front of the other." Nearby, behind a sleek reception desk, security guards scanned badges of employees rushing to a row of shimmering elevator doors. The crowd parted slightly, revealing the building's top elevator, its doors gilded and polished, a sign that it was reserved for only the upper echelon of the corporation. She noticed the name Morgan & Co., etched elegantly into the wall, the same name that had recently topped business magazines for record-breaking deals. Rumor had it that the company's CEO was a mysterious figure, rarely seen but widely whispered about. Some claimed he was impossible to please, others swore he was so exacting that entire teams were replaced at a moment's notice. Natalie took a deep breath and stepped forward, forging ahead to the large cluster of standard elevators to the left. She had an interview on the 42nd floor, an administrative assistant position that might be her lifeline. But in her anxious hurry, she bumped the corner of her file against the shoulder of a tall man. She murmured a flustered apology, not registering much else except his surprised expression as he stepped aside. Her eyes were glued to the nearest open elevator and she rushed in. As the elevator doors slid shut, the overwhelming hush inside gave her a moment to breathe. That's when she noticed something odd. There were only 3 other people inside, all men in dark suits, and they stood as stiff as statues. No typical floor buttons covered the interior panel. Instead, there was a discreet keypad with a digital reader. She glanced over at them, a prickling sense of being out of place trickling down her spine. One of the suited men cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, miss," said the tallest one, his voice far more formal than any security or employee she had encountered. "This elevator is private." "Private?" Natalie's chest tightened. Private for whom? She realized in an instant that she had stepped not into a normal elevator, but the exclusive one leading straight to the company's executive offices, the top floor, rumored to be an entire suite belonging to the CEO. Her stomach sank. She fumbled with her stack of resumes, all the color draining from her face. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize," she whispered. Before she could press the emergency halt or find some button to open the door, the elevator lurched upward with a smooth, unstoppable motion. She bit her lip, feeling every eye on her. So much for a professional first impression, she thought, if I even manage to walk out of this building with a shred of dignity. The men said nothing else, but one discreetly tapped the keypad, presumably to alert someone of an unauthorized passenger. The ride felt both quick and unbearably long at once. The elevator soared past floor after floor until it finally chimed at the very top. The 65th floor. With a soft glide, the doors opened into a hushed, luxurious reception area. Thick carpet stretched out in front of them, and beyond it, floor-to-ceiling windows displayed a breathtaking view of the entire city skyline. She swallowed, stepping aside to let the suited men exit first. One of them pressed a button on his earpiece and murmured something. Natalie caught only a snippet. "Yes, we've arrived. We have a visitor." Her cheeks burned. This was humiliating. "And I have an interview in 15 minutes, she remembered, her mind swirling. She turned, anxious to go back down before security, or worse, the CEO himself confronted her. But as she tried to slip out of the elevator, it suddenly dawned on her that she had no idea how to summon it again, or even operate the keypad that had no labeled buttons. She clutched her folder to her chest and stepped into the lavish hallway. Everything was quiet, eerily quiet, and even more intimidating. The men parted to reveal a large set of ornate double doors across the corridor. Engraved in polished metal read, "CEO Mr. Adrian Morgan." "Wait!" Natalie blurted in a frightened whisper. "I'm not supposed to be here." One of the men, older and with a sympathetic gaze, offered a slight nod. "Follow me," he said. "We'll see if we can have someone escort you back down." She trailed him, her heart pounding harder with each step on the plush carpet. The corridor was lined with black and white photographs depicting the corporation's milestones, mergers, expansions, philanthropic events. At the end of the corridor, the double doors to the CEO's office stood like gates to another world. To her alarm, the older man knocked on the door. A muffled voice from inside invited them in, and as the door opened, her breath caught in her throat. The office was enormous, modern yet refined. Sleek, dark furniture, large windows flooding the space with sunlight, and a large desk where a figure sat, half turned away, glancing at a series of monitors on the wall. He turned around slowly, a tall, impeccably tailored man with sharp features and an even sharper gaze. His hair was a rich auburn, neatly combed back. Though handsome, there was an austere quality about him, as though he wore an invisible shield of authority. In the hush that followed, Natalie realized, horrified, who he was. Adrian Morgan, the elusive CEO. The older man spoke up, clearing his throat. "Sir, there seems to have been a mix-up in the elevator. This young lady boarded by mistake." Adrian rose to his feet, setting a tablet aside. His eyes flicked toward Natalie with measured calm. In that moment, she felt scrutinized from head to toe, like a butterfly pinned under glass. She half expected him to scold her or call security to remove her. Instead, he just studied her quivering stance, the trembling resumes in her arms. He said nothing for a moment, and the silence pressed onto her like an overwhelming weight. Then, unexpectedly, a glimmer of amusement flickered in Adrian's gaze. "I see," he said, his voice low and collected. "An accidental trespass." Natalie inhaled, trying to steady herself. I'm sorry. Mr. Morgan, I was rushing to my interview. I must have followed the crowd without looking at the right elevator sign." A faint lift at the corner of his lips suggested he might not be as furious as she feared, but his tone remained formal. "You have an interview in this building, I presume?" She nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. On the 42nd floor. Administrative position." I didn't mean to intrude. For an instant, Adrian glanced at the older man who still stood by the door. An unspoken understanding passed between them, as if they recognized that her presence here was no coincidence. Adrian turned back to Natalie. "What's your name?" Natalie Jennings." "Ms. Jennings, you look flustered. I'd offer you a seat, but I assume you're pressed for time." "Oh, I am, actually," she stammered, checking her watch and wincing. "I might already be late. Could someone maybe show me how to get down quickly? I don't want to lose the opportunity." Adrian raised an eyebrow, the faintest hint of a smile now on his lips. "In that case, Ms. Jennings, I'll have someone escort you to the correct elevator. But do come back to see me once your interview's finished." Her heart gave a jolt. Was that normal? Why would a CEO want her to come back? Despite her nerves, she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," she breathed. With a polite gesture, he motioned for the older man to guide her out. She followed, her feet barely touching the carpet, as if in a dream. As she exited the opulent office, she stole one last glance over her shoulder, only to see Adrian Morgan's piercing eyes drift back to his monitors. Or so it seemed. A moment later, the tall doors closed, leaving her uncertain and oddly electrified by the encounter. A flurry of actions ensued. A special security detail keyed the correct elevator, apologized for the confusion, and sent her down to the 42nd floor. Her mind was spinning. The building's formal HR assistant greeted her and promptly whisked her off to the interview room, though the entire session passed in a blur. She answered questions mechanically, her mind drifting to the man upstairs. She could hardly focus on the test or the forms they gave her. What just happened? She recalled the brief moment when Adrian Morgan locked eyes with her, how an unspoken curiosity lingered in his look. She rubbed her forehead, scolding herself to concentrate. She had bigger priorities now, like obtaining a job, paying her bills, ensuring she and her sister didn't end up on the street. The last thing she needed was to get caught up in illusions about a mysterious CEO. Or so she thought. Outside, the sun burned across the city skyline. In the topmost suite, Adrian Morgan stood by the window, hands clasped behind his back, his mind replaying a single fleeting moment. That wide-eyed young woman stumbling into his private elevator, almost colliding with him had she not been so enthralled by her own frantic rush. She hadn't realized that the man she brushed in the lobby was him. The accidental brush was so fleeting neither realized, but in that second, her delicate features struck him, her sincerity. A quiet curiosity stirred in him. Why was she so different from the countless faces he saw each day? Adrian exhaled deeply, as though shaking off an unexpected intrusion into his well-guarded world. Still, a small grin formed. Natalie Jennings, he repeated under his breath, letting her name settle into his mind. He pressed a button on his desk phone, speaking to the older man, the one who had escorted her out moments before. "Leonard," Adrian said, "once Ms. Jennings is done with her interview, see to it that she returns here before she leaves. I'd like a word." "Yes, sir," Leonard replied without hesitation. A new chapter was about to begin, though neither Adrian nor Natalie could have foreseen how fate would weave their paths together, or the challenges that would arise when a powerful CEO and a determined job seeker discovered a connection far stronger than a fleeting mistake in an elevator. Natalie's nerves buzzed during the entire interview. Despite the chilly air conditioning on the 42nd floor, she felt sweat threatening to bead along her forehead. She reminded herself to stay calm, to answer precisely, and not let the memory of that surreal elevator ride rattle her composure. The woman across the table, Ms. Potts, led the HR team. Her expression serious, her questions direct. Natalie smiled politely, forcing herself to maintain eye contact. She hoped her replies were coherent, because in her head, echoes of that unintentional trip to the CEO's office played non-stop. "I see. An accidental trespass." The low timbre of Adrian Morgan's voice still made her heart skip. She'd been so sure upon stepping into his domain that she would face immediate dismissal. Instead, his calm curiosity had left her half breathless. A single slip into the wrong elevator usually spelled trouble, yet the CEO hadn't berated her or called security to escort her out. On the contrary, he'd asked her to return. But why? "Yes, of course," Natalie said automatically, catching herself mid-interview response. Ms. Potts had just finished a question about software proficiency. "Right. Focus. I have some experience with scheduling software. At my last job I handled—" Ms. Potts nodded, scribbling notes. "That's good. Though the position may entail other administrative tasks, we're mainly looking for someone with strong organizational skills. Your resume suggests you pick up new processes quickly." Natalie tried not to wilt with relief. She needed this job, desperately. Her bank balance was dismal, the rent was overdue, and she wasn't sure if her kind but overstretched older sister could lend any more support. The last several months had been a downhill tumble. She'd parted ways with her previous employer when the startup folded, then juggled odd part-time gigs that barely covered her groceries. This role was a chance to stabilize everything. She was in no position to let daydreams of a wealthy CEO distract her, particularly if such fantasies risked overshadowing her real, urgent priorities. Ms. Potts clasped her file with a decisive thunk. "We'll let you know our final decision soon, Ms. Jennings," she said in a measured tone. "We have a few candidates to consider. Hopefully, by the end of the week, we can give you an answer." "Thank you," Natalie replied, mustering the best professional smile she could. She collected her purse and folder of spare resumes, then headed for the door, grateful to have concluded this phase. Outside in the hallway lined with tinted glass windows, she exhaled. The 42nd floor was bustling with employees in tailored suits crossing from one meeting room to the next. Phones rang, secretaries typed frantically, and crisp heels clicked on the polished marble. Natalie brushed her hair back, letting the hustle calm her nerves. At least she'd done her part. Now it was in the company's hands. But she remembered the final words from Adrian Morgan. "Come back to see me once your interview's finished." Could that possibly have been more than politeness? Maybe he just wanted to reassure her that no misconduct charges were being filed, or to ensure she wouldn't sue for any reason, though that seemed unlikely. She rubbed her tired eyes, uncertain. A gentle cough at her elbow made her jump. There stood Leonard, the older man who had first escorted her out of the CEO's suite. He gave a polite bow of his head. "Ms. Jennings, Mr. Morgan is expecting you." Her heart flip-flopped. "Already?" Leonard's voice was subdued, his face revealing nothing. "If you're finished here, I can take you up." She chewed the inside of her cheek like she had a real choice, and she had promised to see him after all. "All right," she said at last. They navigated the corridors until reaching the special elevator doors. Leonard keyed in a code, scanning his ID. The polished brass doors slid open with a whisper. Once again, that wave of intimidation hit as she thought of ascending to the 65th floor. But the ride up was smooth, and though her stomach fluttered with nerves, she stood straighter. After all, she'd survived the first encounter. She would handle this one, too. The elevator doors parted onto the same hushed reception area, its plush carpet welcoming their footsteps. Sunlight poured through massive windows, framing the city in a panorama. It was a scene that made her feel like she'd entered a different universe, so far above the street-level clamor, so removed from everyday problems. Natalie followed Leonard down the corridor lined with black and white photographs. Her eyes drifted to a particularly large one, a ceremonial ribbon cutting, Adrian Morgan shaking hands with local officials. In each photo, the CEO wore the same subtle half-smile, always seeming a bit distant from the crowd. She wondered what sort of man he was behind that polished facade. Strict? Possibly. Driven? Certainly. Mysterious? Without a doubt. Leonard opened the double doors. "Ms. Jennings is here," he announced softly, stepping aside. Natalie hesitated on the threshold. Adrian Morgan rose from behind his sleek desk. Once more she noticed the refined lines of his charcoal suit, the crispness of his collar, the quiet authority that emanated. Up close she could see flecks of amber in his eyes. He motioned for her to enter, and she did, trying not to show how her pulse hammered in her throat. "Ms. Jennings," he greeted. "Welcome back." She nodded, swallowing. "Good afternoon, Mr. Morgan." A faint smile touched his lips. "May I call you Natalie?" Her cheeks warmed at his directness. "Sure, of course." He gestured to a comfortable chair near a low table, a more casual setting than behind his imposing desk. She perched tentatively, setting her folder on her lap. Adrian sat across from her, crossing one leg over the other with an elegance that only sharpened her sense of being out of place in her second-hand blouse and shoes, with worn soles. "How was your interview?" he asked, voice mild. She managed a small, polite grin. I think it went okay, but they have other candidates. I'll hear back soon, I guess. He studied her expression. You don't look relieved. She let out a soft laugh, tinged with nerves. I could really use this job, but as you said, it's a process. I'll just have to wait. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. I understand. A pause. I'm sorry if my request to see you again caught you off guard. I wanted to be sure you were all right and to apologize for that awkwardness earlier. You see, that elevator's exclusive. Sometimes we need to keep certain floors private for legal or financial reasons, but you shouldn't feel embarrassed. Embarrassed was an understatement, she thought. She fiddled with a corner of her folder. Thank you. I appreciate that. At first, I was worried I might get in trouble for even stepping foot up here. Adrian's eyes flickered with quiet amusement. Trouble? Hardly. He tilted his head as if weighing something. You mentioned you took a previous role at a startup. Was that your most recent job? Natalie nodded, thrown by his question. Yes, it was. I lost it a few months ago when the company ran out of funds. They let almost everyone go. His jaw tightened slightly, a sign of empathy. She wasn't sure. I see. And what did you do there? Her mind scrolled back over her hodgepodge of duties at the startup, answering emails, scheduling, drafting press releases, sometimes even running for coffee. Well, I was a kind of administrative coordinator. They called me a jack of all trades. I did whatever needed doing. She gave a short laugh. That's how it is in a small startup, I guess. That skill set might be more valuable than you imagine, Adrian remarked. Resourcefulness is underrated in large corporations, yet it's vital. The conversation paused. Through the expansive windows behind him, the city stretched out like a sea of skyscrapers and highways. Another life, she thought, for those at the top. She found it nearly impossible to read this man. He was direct but not unkind. Each question felt purposeful, though she couldn't guess where he was heading. I'd like to propose something, he said at last. A few times a year, I select a candidate to train personally on certain administrative and managerial tasks. Someone fresh, not jaded by corporate politics. Not every large company invests in that approach, but I've found it beneficial. Would you be interested? Natalie blinked, taken aback. Are you offering me a position, Mr. Morgan? Because that's what it sounded like, even if she scarcely believed her own ears. The corner of his mouth curved wryly. I'm suggesting an in-house apprenticeship, you could say, for someone who's quick on their feet and who's willing to learn. You'd work alongside me and a few of my top managers to understand the core functions of the company. It could open doors for you beyond the typical administrative role. Her heart pounded. This was surreal. Moments ago, she was anxious about whether she'd even land an entry-level job. Now the CEO offered a direct path to his inner circle, but caution flagged in her mind. She barely knew him. Why pick her? People didn't just do that out of the kindness of their hearts. Was she being set up for disappointment? Or was there a hidden catch? She cleared her throat, searching for the right words. I'm flattered, but I guess I need to understand, why me? Adrian's gaze softened, letting a hint of warmth seep through the polished exterior. There's a certain potential I sense. A blend of your background, your composure in unusual situations, like ending up in the wrong elevator. His tone carried a faint note of humor there. And yes, perhaps there's an instinctive hunch on my part. Sometimes the best decisions come from instincts. Natalie was silent, processing. She cast her eyes downward briefly, imagining how drastically her life could change if she said yes. Could it be a risk? Absolutely. But what if it was the very break she needed? A chance to leap beyond the constraints that had weighed her down. Finally, she let out a breath, meeting his gaze. All right, I'm interested. A flicker of approval crossed Adrian's face. He extended a hand, and after a slight hesitation, she grasped it. She felt the faint pressure of his handshake, firm yet not overbearing. That momentary contact sent a spark down her spine. "Then, let's discuss the details," he said. "You'll need to speak with HR, fill out the necessary paperwork, and finalize a contract. You'll receive a modest salary, but the real value is the mentorship, direct exposure to how we operate at the top. Does that suit you?" Yes, of course," she managed, half-dazed. He released her hand, rising. "Good. We'll set it up. Leonard will coordinate so you can start tomorrow or as soon as you're ready." "Tomorrow?" she repeated, voice shaky. "Wow, that's fast." Adrian gave a genteel shrug. "When something needs doing, I prefer not to wait." She stood too, smoothing down her skirt, uncertain if she was about to wake up from a very strange dream. As they walked toward the office door, a million questions unspooled in her mind. Would her future co-workers resent her for skipping normal channels? How would she adapt to a role so far beyond her comfort zone? And above all, was she prepared for daily interactions with a CEO whose quiet intensity might tie her stomach in knots? Yet as she stepped into the corridor, feeling the plush carpet beneath her feet, Natalie also felt a pulse of excitement. Maybe, just maybe, this was her shot at something bigger than she'd dared imagine. "I look forward to seeing you tomorrow," Adrian said, pausing by the threshold. She summoned the best confident smile she could muster. "Thank you again, Mr. Morgan." He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to remind her to address him by his first name, or to share one final statement. But the moment lingered, a swirling tension that neither seemed to have the words to clarify. Finally, with a courteous incline of his head, Adrian turned back into his office. Natalie stood for a second, her heart in her throat. Then, exhaling, she walked back to the elevator with Leonard. The entire ride down, an electric realization flickered through her. Tomorrow, a new life would begin. And whether it turned out to be a miracle or a fiasco, everything about her future had just shifted, thanks to one fateful stumble into the wrong elevator and one gaze from a man who seldom let anyone close. Natalie's morning began with her alarm shrieking at the crack of dawn. Though her body ached for more sleep, her nerves had sparked to life the instant her eyes fluttered open. Today was her first day working directly under Adrian Morgan. The memory of their conversation still reeled through her mind, and she wondered if the entire encounter had been a vivid dream. Yet the business card she clutched on her nightstand bearing Morgan & Co. in gold script proved otherwise. She hurried through her cramped studio apartment, rummaging through the small closet to find something presentable. In her short time unemployed, her wardrobe had suffered from repeated wear, but she eventually selected a crisp button-down blouse and a knee-length pencil skirt, both in subdued shades of gray. She gave them a quick press with her old iron, hoping the outfit would at least look somewhat polished. Her reflection in the tiny mirror pinned to the back of her door showed a young woman with dark circles beneath anxious eyes, but also with a flicker of determination. She could do this. She would do this. A new start. A chance to step out from behind the shadow of near poverty and insecurity. The morning commute on the subway was a blur. Still reeling from the surprising opportunity, she mentally rehearsed possible tasks Adrian might assign her: administrative chores, scheduling, maybe even research. How did one act around a major CEO while staying composed? She gripped the subway pole tighter, ignoring the crush of the crowd. In just a short while, she would be in the building's top floors, navigating a world she never dreamed would be accessible to someone like her. By the time she entered Morgan & Co.'s gleaming lobby, her hands felt slightly clammy, but she resisted the urge to wipe them on her skirt. The bustle of suits around her underscored the high-stakes environment, men and women in tailored clothing gliding across the marble floors, all purposeful, all belonging. She inhaled deeply. This day is about proving I belong too. She approached the security desk, remembering how to request the private elevator. A young guard scanned her name from a prepared list, then handed her a visitor's badge with her photograph. "Good morning, Miss Jennings," he said. "You're expected on the 65th floor." A swirl of apprehension and excitement. She nodded politely and stepped onto the designated elevator. Before the doors slid closed, a handful of employees peered with open curiosity. She could almost read the question in their eyes. Who is she, going up there? But as the elevator whisked her up, she forced her heartbeat to steady. She replayed the image of Adrian Morgan's half-smile, that subtle promise in his voice. It's an apprenticeship. Soon enough, the corridor leading to his office came into view. Leonard waited outside the elevator as though he'd timed her arrival to the second. His pleasant but reserved expression greeted her. "Good morning, Miss Jennings. Mr. Morgan asked me to bring you straight in." She smoothed a stray lock of hair and followed Leonard down the familiar hallway. The photos on the walls once again caught her eye. The same images of the CEO awarding scholarships, attending philanthropic galas, or overseeing groundbreakings for new corporate projects. There was a philanthropic dimension to Morgan & Co. that had evidently garnered them respect. She wondered if Adrian's proposition to her was part of that philanthropic spirit, or if he truly saw something special in her. Leonard opened the imposing double doors with the same quiet efficiency as before. Inside, the office glowed with morning sunshine, the glass windows framing a view of the city still waking up below. Adrian stood by the window, arms crossed thoughtfully, wearing a dark navy suit that complemented his auburn hair. He turned at their entrance, and despite her swirl of emotions, Natalie picked up on a subtle warmth in his gaze. "Ms. Jennings," he said, offering her a small, welcoming gesture, "I'm glad you could start so soon." She gave a polite smile, stepping forward. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Morgan." He inclined his head. "Please, call me Adrian. Formality can have its place, but when we're working closely, let's keep a comfortable environment." Leonard discreetly took his leave, and Adrian walked over to a sleek glass table at the side of the room. "I've arranged some initial materials for you," he explained. "Not exactly a typical first day, I know." On the table lay a company-issued laptop, a slim binder labeled Morgan & Co. Departmental Overview, and a small box. As Natalie approached, curiosity tugged at her. "Thank you. What's in the box?" He lifted the lid, revealing a slender smartphone, still sealed. "A corporate phone for your use. We keep certain communications on secure lines. You'll need this for scheduling and real-time updates." A subtle pang of amazement ran through her. This was real, not just a vague promise. She gingerly picked up the phone, recalling all the times she could barely afford her monthly phone bill. Now she had a brand new device, courtesy of the corporation. She couldn't help feeling a bit awed. Adrian watched her reaction, then gestured toward a seat. "Please, have a seat, Natalie. Let's talk through what your next few weeks might look like." They settled in chairs facing each other, a coffee table separating them. Through the panoramic windows, bright sunlight drenched the office, making the polished wood floors shimmer. Adrian pressed a remote, and a wall screen powered on with a minimal hum, displaying some bullet points. "Over the next month," he began, "I'd like to rotate you through our principal branches: finance, operations, public relations, and my own executive department. You'll shadow key players, but also complete daily tasks to get a real sense of our processes." "That sounds incredible," she managed. Her mind raced with the scale of such an undertaking. He nodded. "Eventually you'll return here to put those experiences together. Maybe you'll propose a small project or develop a method to streamline something. The idea is that by seeing the puzzle pieces, you'll better grasp how they fit." Her heart pounded. She'd never had a job that started with a plan like this, a personalized rotational program. "I'm ready," she said, trying to keep her voice from trembling. "Though, I'll confess I'm nervous. I don't want to disappoint you or the company." Adrian's eyes flickered with empathy. "I expect some nerves. In fact, it tells me you care about doing a good job. You've got potential, Natalie, and it's my role to see that potential realized. We learn more from stumbles than from easy successes, so don't worry if everything doesn't go perfectly." His words were calm yet encouraging, as though he truly believed in her success. She took a breath and reminded herself to have faith. "All right. Thank you." A knock on the door interrupted. A tall, striking woman with pristine posture and a black suit stepped in. Her hair was coiled into a neat chignon, and her expression was cordial, but all business. "Mr. Morgan," she greeted. "Legal has the revised contract for Ms. Jennings, and I've also brought the new confidentiality agreements." "Excellent," Adrian said, gesturing for her to place them on the table. He introduced the woman as Ms. Pryor, the in-house legal counsel. Ms. Pryor gave Natalie a measured smile, then went over the contract details. A baseline salary at a higher rate than typical entry-level admin roles. Healthcare and basic benefits. A confidentiality clause ensuring that any proprietary information stays within the company. Provisions for performance reviews at 30 and 60 days. Natalie skimmed the pages, her pulse picking up. The salary alone was more than she'd earned at her startup job. She caught Adrian's gaze and he offered an affirmative nod, giving her the confidence to sign. She tried not to let her hand tremble as she inked her name on each line. It felt as though she were stepping onto an entirely new path. When they finished, Ms. Pryor gave a polite nod and retreated, leaving the contract on Adrian's desk. He turned back to Natalie, a trace of satisfaction in his demeanor. "Now you're officially part of the team." She allowed herself a wide grin. I don't know how to thank you." He waved off her gratitude. "Just work hard and keep an open mind. That'll be thanks enough." His phone on the desk lit up, a silent vibration. He glanced at it, exhaling. "I'm due for a meeting shortly, but I'd like to show you something before I go." Intrigued, Natalie followed him through a side door she hadn't noticed before. It opened into what appeared to be a smaller, more personal workspace. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, stacked with books on business strategy, leadership, and even a few fiction titles. A large window gave a private angle on the city skyline, unobstructed by the high rises near the main office. In one corner sat a small couch and coffee table, with a potted plant cheerfully adding green to the otherwise sleek decor. "This is where I come when I need to think," Adrian explained quietly, letting her take in the surroundings. "Occasionally I'll hold confidential discussions here, away from the bustle. Feel free to use it if you need a calm space." She gingerly brushed a hand against the edge of the couch, marveling that he'd entrust her to such a personal area. "It's really nice." He leaned against a shelf, arms folded. "I had an office once that felt like a high-security bunker, sealed windows, fluorescent lights, and no sense of time. I've learned environment matters." She studied him more closely in the soft light. He carried himself with a precise elegance, but there was also something introspective about him, as if the constant hum of corporate life weighed on him privately. Maybe she glimpsed a side of Adrian Morgan seldom seen by outsiders. A tap on the open door interrupted them. Leonard spoke in his respectful hush. "Sir, the board members have arrived for the meeting." Adrian nodded. "Thank you, Leonard." He looked at Natalie, his voice gentle. "I'll have Ms. Pryor or one of my assistants show you around the floors you'll visit today. Start getting to know people. Then we'll reconvene this evening if possible to recap. Sound good?" She gathered her new things, offering a bright smile. "Yes, absolutely." Leonard directed her back toward the main office as Adrian slipped out to the boardroom. Though her mind buzzed with questions, an excited thrill underlay it all. She was actually part of this world now. And while she still felt an undercurrent of self-doubt, she couldn't ignore the sense that Adrian's presence might steady her. In the corridor, Ms. Pryor waited, prepared to escort Natalie to HR and then the different departments. As they headed for the elevator, Natalie recalled the swirl of events that had brought her here, that tiny, fateful moment of stepping into the exclusive elevator, the surprise invitation from Adrian Morgan, the sense of being singled out from a sea of applicants. She promised herself she wouldn't waste the opportunity. Not for anything. She pressed the down button, the elevator dinged, and within moments, the doors slid open. The day's tasks lay ahead. New people to meet, new routines to learn, and possibly new challenges to face. The pressure rose in her chest, but she inhaled once more, thinking about how fleeting life's twists can be. One slip into the wrong elevator changed my entire future, she mused. Maybe fate, or luck, or some cosmic push had guided her. Regardless of the reason, she was here now, forging a path that only days ago she didn't realize existed, and a quiet voice in her heart whispered that everything might never be the same again. Natalie's new phone vibrated in her bag as she stepped out of the elevator on the 27th floor. She was tagging along with Ms. Pryor, who had promised to show her the key departments before lunch. The hallway here felt like a world away from Adrian's serene office upstairs. Phones rang incessantly. Employees scurried with armfuls of documents, and hushed but intense conversations filled every corner. "It's more fast-paced down here," Ms. Pryor observed with a small smile, leading Natalie through a set of glass doors labeled Finance and Accounting. "I always tell new hires if you survive the 27th floor, you can survive anywhere in this company." Immediately, they were greeted by the hum of electronics and the rustling of papers. Dozens of cubicles stretched into a labyrinth, each harboring a person glued to spreadsheets or phone calls. Huge windows let sunlight pour across the open floor plan, but the environment was abuzz, not tranquil. A slender, bespectacled woman popped up from her seat, spotting them. "Hello, Miss Pryor," she called, scurrying over. She wore a polka-dot blouse and carried a binder pressed to her chest. Her eyes flicked to Natalie with eager curiosity. "Good morning, Candace," Miss Pryor said. "This is Natalie Jennings, Mr. Morgan's new apprentice." She used that last word with a slight tilt of her head, as if still getting used to the idea. "We're giving her a tour of the main branches." "Apprentice," Candace repeated brightly. "How exciting!" Her gaze swept over Natalie. "I handle daily reconciliation reports here in finance. It's not the flashiest side of the business, but we keep the lights on." Natalie smiled. "Nice to meet you, Candace. I'm sure I'll be coming by often, learning how everything ties together." Candace nodded so enthusiastically that her glasses slipped. "Oh, absolutely. The more you know about finances, the easier it is to, well, do anything else around here." She pivoted, pointing toward the rows of cubicles. "Most of these folks are accountants and analysts. We track budgets, generate financial statements, coordinate with external auditors. Lots of fun." Behind Candace, two employees in adjacent cubicles lifted their heads, openly intrigued. One gave Natalie a quick wave before returning to his screen. Despite the hustle, Natalie sensed genuine warmth here. People seemed proud of their role, even if it was unglamorous compared to the executive suite. It struck her that Morgan & Co. wasn't just a faceless corporate giant. It was a network of dedicated teams, each piece vital. "Shall we move on?" Ms. Pryor asked after a few minutes, checking her watch. "We'll come back another day for a deeper dive, but for now, I want to show you operations." Natalie said a quick goodbye to Candace and followed Ms. Pryor down another corridor. While walking, her mind replayed that single charged word, apprentice. That was the label Ms. Pryor had used, and it came straight from Adrian himself. Did it unsettle the staff? Were they suspicious of her? She couldn't quite tell. They turned a corner to find a glass-walled conference room. The door was open a crack, revealing a team mid-discussion around a large table scattered with flowcharts. A stern-faced man wearing a crisp shirt stood at the head, his posture commanding. "Good. Jacob's here," Ms. Pryor noted softly. "Jacob runs operations. Let's see if he has a minute." Without waiting for an invitation, she pushed open the door just enough to catch Jacob's attention. He glanced up, annoyance flickering until recognition of Ms. Pryor's face set in. Then his expression shifted to grudging respect. He said something to his team, then stepped away from the table and joined them in the hallway. "Morning, Ms. Pryor," he said, voice controlled. He was tall, with dark hair brushed neatly off his forehead, and his tie displayed the company colors in subtle stripes. "What brings you to our corner?" "I'm giving Ms. Jennings here a quick introduction," she replied. "Jacob, this is Natalie Jennings. She'll be shadowing various departments as part of an executive development arrangement." Jacob's eyes narrowed, scanning Natalie head to toe. "I see." He managed a polite nod, but his smile was tight-lipped. "Well, we're a bit swamped, Ms. Jennings, but I can spare a moment to give you the gist of what we do." Natalie felt self-conscious under his direct gaze. She mustered a warm smile. "Thanks. I promise I won't intrude too much today." Jacob nodded again, glancing at Ms. Pryor as if to confirm how much he was required to say. "Operations is the backbone. Logistics, supply chain management, quality control, project timetables. If finance keeps the lights on, we keep the machine well-oiled." "Right," Natalie said. "And how do you coordinate with Mr. Morgan's office?" Jacob paused. "He sets big goals, sometimes with abrupt deadlines. My job is to translate them into actionable steps for each division. I ensure everything runs like clockwork, or as close to that as possible." His tone suggested pride in his domain, but beneath that, Natalie detected a certain wariness, maybe toward her or her rumored direct link to Adrian Morgan. She had a sudden, uncomfortable thought. Did these department heads resent a newcomer with special access? "Anyway," he added, cutting the pause short, "I need to get back to this meeting. Ms. Jennings, best of luck." He gave a curt nod and turned on his heel, disappearing back into the conference room. The door clicked shut, leaving Natalie and Ms. Pryor alone in the corridor's hush. Ms. Pryor's brow creased slightly. "Jacob can be intense," she murmured. "Don't take it personally. He's under constant pressure." "Of course," Natalie said, though her spirits dipped a bit. She wondered if this was how it would be. Some employees friendly, others closed off, uncertain whether she was an ally or a threat to the established hierarchy. Undeterred, Ms. Pryor continued the tour. They descended to the 21st floor next, labeled Public Relations and Communications. It was like entering an entirely different company. Vibrant wall colors, open collaborative spaces, and people in more varied attire. Some sporting bright patterns or casual blazers. The buzz here was part adrenaline, part creativity. A man with rolled-up sleeves noticed them and broke into a grin. "Hey, Ms. Pryor, is this the rumored new star apprentice?" He introduced himself as Trevor, brand strategist. "So nice to meet you, Natalie. PR's the megaphone. We shape the narrative outside these walls. Product launches, crisis control, social media presence. The fun stuff." Natalie laughed lightly. "Sounds like a lot of responsibility. And probably quick turnarounds, I bet." "You have no idea." He winked. "We're used to spinning gold out of straw in 12 hours or less. And if Mr. Morgan calls with a last-minute pivot, we hustle." Despite the frantic undertone, the energy on this floor felt welcoming. People smiled and waved, a few eyes lingering to gauge who she was. Trevor pointed to an area covered in whiteboards, scribbled with slogans, campaign ideas, and arrows. "Brainstorm Central," he declared. "When you do your rotation here, I'll let you join a session. You might have fun, or you might run screaming. Either way, it's an experience." She nodded eagerly, feeling grateful to see at least some corners of the company where the atmosphere wasn't so guarded. As they chatted, her phone buzzed again. She glanced down, spotting the new corporate phone's screen lighting up. A calendar reminder from A. Morgan. He had already synced a meeting invitation for 6 p.m., a short note. "End-of-day check-in, my office." Her pulse jumped. Even in the midst of this grand tour, he was keeping her in his orbit. She looked back to Trevor, hoping her smile wasn't too transparent. When they finished exploring PR, Ms. Pryor checked her watch. "That covers the main departments you'll need to understand right away. Others, like legal and human resources, are smaller and might not require full rotations. But we'll see." She paused, giving Natalie a measured look. "How are you feeling so far?" Natalie exhaled. "Honestly, it's a lot, but it's exhilarating. Everyone has a role, a piece of the puzzle." Ms. Pryor's eyes softened. "Good. Keep that sense of wonder. In a company this size, it's easy to get jaded, but I think Mr. Morgan wants you to stay curious." They took the elevator down a few more floors to HR, where Natalie collected some final paperwork. Benefit forms, ID confirmations, and even squeezed in a quick photo for an official staff badge, different from her earlier visitor pass. Each step felt surreal, yet also anchored her more firmly in this new reality. By midday, Ms. Pryor led her to a small lounge with panoramic city views for lunch. Natalie purchased a sandwich and coffee, then sank into a chair by the window. She mentally reviewed everything: the finance labyrinth with Candace's friendly wave, Jacob's curt but necessary pep talk in operations, Trevor's flamboyant PR realm, and her new phone vibrating with direct pings from Adrian's calendar. Despite a swirl of self-doubt, like whether she truly deserved such an insider's pass, Natalie felt a quiet thrill. An entire corporate ecosystem had opened before her, and she had a guide in Adrian Morgan, the firm's figurehead. She took a bite of her sandwich, recalling how he had said, "We learn more from stumbles than from easy successes." She was bound to stumble somewhere in this sprawling maze, but she vowed she'd learn, adapt, and flourish. Perhaps her best advantage was exactly what Adrian had guessed: a willingness to try without the usual cynicism. She glanced at her watch. About 5.5 hours until she'd meet with him upstairs. Her heart fluttered at the thought. What new revelations might come? Would he ask her impressions of each department, test her knowledge, or would the conversation veer toward something more personal? Sipping her coffee, Natalie forced herself to stay grounded. She had a long afternoon ahead, meeting more staff and absorbing new tasks. After that, she'd see Adrian again, like stepping briefly into his quiet fortress above the city. One day at a time, she reminded herself. One department at a time. She was here to learn and to prove she could stand beside the best. But deep within, she couldn't deny a flicker of curiosity about her reserved, commanding mentor, and whether the professional lines between them might ever blur into something unanticipated. Natalie spent the afternoon navigating a steady current of new faces and tasks, her mind whirling with facts and impressions. After finishing lunch with Ms. Pryor, she dove into a whirlwind orientation, brief stops at different workstations to observe the daily tempo. Though the official tour was mostly concluded, Ms. Pryor had insisted that seeing people in action was the best crash course. Everyone seemed aware she was shadowing under Adrian Morgan's auspices, which elicited a range of reactions. Curiosity, kindness, even guarded deference. It was both thrilling and a bit disconcerting. Back at her old startup, personal connections formed quickly because the team was tiny. Here, with hundreds of employees scattered among dozens of floors, forging genuine rapport would take time. Still, each quick conversation gave her glimpses of the company's heartbeat. Around 2 in the afternoon, Ms. Pryor was called away for a legal briefing. Natalie found herself temporarily on her own, left in the HR suite with a request. Just watch how we handle the employee onboarding, the forms, the background checks, the system updates. It'll help you appreciate what goes into the workforce behind the scenes. Eager to be useful, Natalie hovered by one of the HR associates, a cheerful man named Eric. He typed at lightning speed, inputting data from the day's new hires. This system links directly to payroll, so any tiny mistake can cause big problems, Eric explained, not taking his eyes off the screen. Misspell one name, and a direct deposit could bounce. She nodded, gleaning how each detail fit into the bigger puzzle. He let her try entering a few lines of data for a test profile, patiently coaching her to watch out for formatting quirks. After a few successful entries, she grinned at the small sense of accomplishment. It was mundane, but also a reminder that the larger machine of Morgan & Co. depended on countless small tasks done right. Shortly before 3, her phone buzzed, a direct message from Candace in finance. "Hey Natalie, free to pop by? I have something neat to show you." C. Curious, she told Eric she'd return later and took the elevator back up to the 27th floor. The difference in atmosphere was instant. The hallway bustled, but her presence wasn't as jarring now. Perhaps people were already getting used to seeing her around. Candace was waiting by the reception desk, that polka dot blouse bright against the neutral decor. "Natalie," she said, beckoning her closer. "You're just in time. We're processing a major quarterly report for Mr. Morgan, and I thought you might want to see how it's compiled." "Sounds interesting," Natalie replied, following Candace through rows of cubicles toward a quiet corner. Several monitors displayed intricate spreadsheets, each row dense with numbers, formulas, and color-coded cells. Candace motioned for her to sit in a spare chair. "We do preliminary data entry all month, but at quarter's end, everything gets consolidated into these master files. Then we produce a summarized breakdown for the board and for Mr. Morgan. It's a living document. He sometimes modifies it until the very last minute." She demonstrated how pivot tables could highlight profit margins, overhead costs, and departmental expenses. Natalie's eyes widened at the complexity. "I had no idea so many steps were behind a simple chart or slide." "Right?" Candace grinned. "We keep the numbers precise so no one can poke holes later. It's vital for transparency and decisions on resource allocation. In bigger companies, finance can feel like a locked vault of secrets. Here, Mr. Morgan wants everyone aware of the bigger picture. That's unusual but refreshing." Natalie remembered how Adrian had shown her that personal library, how he preferred open vistas. He didn't strike her as a typical corporate magnate. Even these employees noticed something different in the culture, an insistence on knowledge sharing. Another colleague, wearing headphones, looked up from his screen and waved. Candace lowered her voice. "That's Jorge. He's been pulling data from the Asia branch. Time zones can be a nightmare. He probably worked half the night." Natalie watched them a few minutes more, absorbing the systematic approach, cross-referencing data, verifying each figure with the region's local accounts, then feeding it into the main sheet. She found an odd thrill in witnessing the behind-the-scenes diligence, like stepping backstage at a grand theater, seeing all the ropes and pulleys. After about half an hour, Candace stretched, cracking her neck. "We do a final check tomorrow, but I wanted you to see a snapshot. If you're going to be working closely with Mr. Morgan, you'll probably hear references to these reports." "Thank you for letting me watch," Natalie said sincerely. "It's impressive how meticulously each line is handled." Candace shrugged modestly. "Just part of the job, but I love it. Numbers are like a puzzle." She tapped her keyboard, finalizing a calculation. "Anytime you have questions, ping me." They exchanged quick contact details, and Natalie headed out, once again struck by how open people were. She recalled Jacob's cool demeanor, but that might just be his style. Not everyone had Candace's warmth or Trevor's flamboyance. By 4:30, she was back at the HR floor, finishing a final set of forms under Eric's guidance. Fatigue nudged at the edges of her mind. So many floors, so many new tasks in just a single day. But adrenaline still propelled her. She scanned the time. An hour and a half until her check-in with Adrian. Enough time to tie up loose ends, maybe slip away for a glass of water and a moment to breathe. She excused herself and wandered into a lounge area near the windows. The city stretched out below, the late afternoon sun painting skyscrapers with golden light. As she sipped water, her phone chimed. A new message from an unknown internal extension. She opened it. "Hello, Ms. Jennings. This is Jacob from Operations. Could you stop by 26F meeting room? We need a quick word." The request startled her. She hadn't expected Jacob to reach out after that curt introduction. She typed a polite reply. "Sure, on my way." She rode the elevator one floor up, stepping out into a more muted hallway. The signage read, Operations Project Management. She spotted a glass-walled room labeled 26F in bold. Through the window she could see Jacob standing alone, arms crossed, apparently waiting. Entering, she smiled uncertainly. "Hi, Jacob, you wanted to see me?" He nodded, gesturing for her to close the door. "Yes, thanks for coming so quickly." The meeting room was minimalist, a long table, a whiteboard, a few chairs. Jacob stood near the window, the city forming a dramatic backdrop behind him. "Have a seat." Natalie lowered herself into a chair, her heart beating faster. Jacob's demeanor exuded tension. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. He studied her with a penetrating gaze. "I'll be direct. I've heard from a couple of managers that you're visiting departments under a special arrangement with Mr. Morgan. Some say you're being groomed for a leadership fast track. Others worry you might be some sort of internal auditor or watchdog." She blinked. "I'm neither. I'm just learning," she said, trying not to sound defensive. "Mr. Morgan calls it an apprenticeship. He wants me to understand each branch." Jacob drummed his fingers on the table. "I see. So you don't have any official rank over us, correct? You're not here to issue mandates?" "Absolutely not," Natalie replied. "I'm not in charge of anything. I'm new myself." He nodded slowly. "All right. I needed to hear that directly. The rumor mill churns fast and I prefer clarity. Don't take it personally. I have to protect my team's morale." She relaxed a fraction. "I understand. People might feel uneasy if they suspect I'm reporting behind their backs." Jacob let out a small sigh, tension easing from his shoulders. "I've worked here a long time. I'm used to corporate politics, but Adrian Morgan's approach is unusual. I won't pretend I fully grasp why he singled you out, but if he trusts you, I'll respect that. Just remember, the operational side is about hitting real, tangible targets. I can't have disruptions." Natalie bit back a wry smile. "Understood. I'll keep a low profile." He crossed his arms again, though less aggressively. "Good. By the way, a heads up. In a week or so, we're launching a critical project tied to expansion. Morgan wants each department aligned, which means we'll be watching deadlines like hawks. That's not the best time for social tours." "I appreciate the warning," she said sincerely, relieved that he seemed to be dropping his guard. "I'll coordinate carefully with you." Jacob gave a curt nod, checking his watch. "All right, thanks for your time. I've got another meeting." She took that as her cue to leave. "Likewise," she said, rising. "I'm sure I'll see you around." Exiting the room, she released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. At least now there was clarity. Jacob wasn't antagonistic, just protective of his domain. She could handle that. Her phone showed 5:20. The day had rushed by. She decided to return to the ground-floor lounge for a brief rest before heading up to Adrian's office. She needed a moment to gather her thoughts, check any last emails, and not appear flustered when she saw him. Downstairs, the lobby had quieted compared to the morning rush. Office workers trickled out early or scurried to wrap tasks before day's end. Natalie found a vacant seat near a sleek water feature. Soft lighting glinted off the marble, and the faint murmur of water offered a soothing backdrop. She pulled out her phone, scanning the company intranet messages and verifying her schedule for tomorrow. Each department had begun peppering her with invites, some for routine updates, others for more in-depth sessions. She typed polite confirmations, thankful that Ms. Pryor had loaded her phone with contacts. Her gaze drifted across the lobby to the polished floor where she'd once hurried in a frantic dash, entirely unaware that stepping into the wrong elevator would set off a chain of events altering her life. Her chest tightened in an odd mix of gratitude and nerves. She rubbed her palms, trying to center herself. At exactly 5:50, she decided to head up. Better to be early than keep Adrian waiting. The special elevator ride felt more familiar this time, though it still stirred anticipation. The hush of the 65th floor reception greeted her, and she found Leonard at his usual post. He offered a pleasant nod. "Good evening, Ms. Jennings. Mr. Morgan is expecting you. Go right in." Taking a steadying breath, she pushed open the office doors. Adrian was behind his desk, reviewing a series of documents on a tablet. The skyline behind him had transformed into a tapestry of lights. Nightfall had begun to cloak the city. He glanced up, meeting her eyes with that signature calm. "Welcome back," he said, motioning for her to approach. "How was your first day?" She smiled, stepping forward. The door closed softly behind her, sealing them in the private sphere of his office. Despite the formal setting, a flicker of warmth passed between them, charged by the events of the day. "I learned a lot," she said. "Every department had its own flavor." He rose, walking around the desk to stand closer to her. "I look forward to hearing all the details. Tell me everything." And with those words, the distance between them, hierarchical, physical, seemed to narrow just a bit, as though they were stepping into a more confidential realm than boss and trainee. The city's nightlights sparkled through the glass walls, reminding Natalie that somewhere far below, everyday life continued. But here, in the lofty suite at day's end, a new conversation was about to unfold, one that might set the tone for all their future interactions. Natalie settled into the visitor's chair in front of Adrian's desk, feeling a faint swirl of nerves and excitement. Evening light played against the massive windows, throwing reflections across the polished floor. The day had been long, yet she sensed her heart still buzzing with energy. Adrian Morgan's gaze, steady, curious, reminded her that this end-of-day check-in wasn't just a formality. It was a moment to connect, to share her fresh impressions and perhaps, she thought, reveal her vulnerabilities. She placed her new company phone on the desk's corner. "Well," she began, "I spent the morning with Ms. Pryor and the HR team, observed how they handle onboarding. There's a lot of detail work, from the background checks to payroll data entries. Later I visited finance, and Candace showed me how they compile quarterly reports. The complexity was eye-opening. Then..." She paused, exhaling softly. "Then I checked in with operations." Adrian leaned back against the desk, arms loosely crossed. "How did that go? I know Jacob can be protective." A wry smile touched her lips. "He definitely made sure I wasn't there to disrupt his workflows, but by the end, he seemed more at ease. He just wants clarity." Adrian nodded. "Jacob's been with me a long time. He's blunt but loyal. His job is to deliver results under tight deadlines, so he guards his team from any unnecessary chaos." The faintest flicker of warmth, gratitude, reflected in her expression. She appreciated how Adrian didn't sugarcoat the dynamic. "I can respect that," she said. "It's impressive to see how each department has its own culture. Finance was almost meticulous and quiet. PR was bold and creative, and operations was, well, businesslike and intense." Adrian gestured for her to continue. "Go on, I want your candid impressions. You don't have to filter yourself." She pursed her lips, feeling encouraged to speak freely. "All right, finance had this friendly vibe. Candace was enthusiastic and proud of her spreadsheets. PR felt like an exciting brainstorm hub. Trevor's personality fits that environment perfectly. Operations was all about structure and meeting targets, though it came off a bit intimidating. It's like each floor has its own temperature." He considered her words, tapping a pen lightly on the desk. "That's what makes Morgan & Co. both challenging and rewarding. The question is, did anything surprise you?" She paused, reflecting. "Honestly, the openness did. People were mostly willing to explain things. I was expecting some might clam up or see me as a threat, but aside from Jacob's initial caution, everyone else was kind. I guess I didn't expect such transparency in a big corporation." A small grin curved across Adrian's face. "I've tried to foster that. Transparency can be risky. Some fear that too much knowledge in the ranks leads to power shifts. but I believe informed employees make better decisions. They feel invested. His words rekindled the sense that he was not a typical CEO. "It shows," she murmured. "I've worked at places where everyone was suspicious and siloed. This is different." "Good." Adrian gestured toward the seating area near the windows. "Shall we move to a more comfortable spot? I often do these recaps in a less formal setting. Helps keep the discussion candid." Natalie stood and they walked side by side to the small arrangement of leather chairs near the giant glass pane that overlooked the glittering city. The sky had deepened, blanketing the skyline with an evening glow. She couldn't help marveling at the view. It felt like standing above a kingdom of lights. Adrian lowered himself into one of the chairs, indicating the one opposite. When Natalie settled, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "In the days ahead, you'll dive deeper, not just glimpse from a distance. That means tasks, deadlines, maybe small projects. But I also want you to keep me informed of any friction you see, things that hamper collaboration or efficiency." She nodded, recalling Jacob's caution. "I don't want to cause any paranoia. I'm not a spy, but if I notice serious issues—" "Precisely. You're not an enforcer," he clarified. "But you have a fresh perspective. You might spot blind spots those of us entrenched in our roles can't see." Her heart fluttered with a mix of excitement and responsibility. "I'll do my best. Honestly, I'm humbled you trust me with that. I'm just starting out." Adrian's expression gentled. "I trust instincts. When I first met you—" He paused, a subtle quirk to his lips. "In that elevator fiasco, I sensed you had the openness and adaptability big companies often lose. A sincerity. Hard to articulate, but it's there. And we need that." Heat rose to her cheeks. Her reaction to his compliment was equal parts gratitude and an unexpected blush. "Thank you. I hope to prove worthy." He gave a faint half-smile and shifted in his chair. "On a personal note, how are you adjusting? The building's scale alone can be overwhelming." "Oh, absolutely," she admitted with a faint laugh. "I was worried I'd get lost, or that I'd walk into the wrong elevator again." A soft chuckle escaped him. "At least we can say that particular mistake turned out well." His eyes sparkled momentarily, reflecting amusement and perhaps something else. "But in seriousness, if you find it too much at any point, let me know. This arrangement isn't meant to crush you with stress." She sighed, shoulders relaxing. "It's a lot, but I'm happy. This morning felt surreal, meeting everyone, exploring different floors. But I haven't felt this hopeful in a long time. After the startup closed, I was drifting, worried about making rent, uncertain of my next step." The conversation felt unexpectedly personal, but she didn't see judgment in Adrian's face, rather empathy. "Life can shift drastically," he said softly. "I remember times when I was uncertain too, though it might seem I've always stood in a corner office." "You? Uncertain?" she asked, gently, intrigued. "It's hard to picture." He exhaled, gaze roaming the skyline. "In my early years, I struggled to transform the family firm into something bigger, more modern. Not everyone appreciated my methods. I was younger than many seasoned executives, and I had to earn their respect. Some days I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake in pushing so hard. But I found the right mentors, persevered, and made my share of stumbles along the way." She listened, fascinated that he'd share a glimpse of vulnerability. "It's inspiring to know you faced doubts too. From the outside, it looks like you command everything with such ease." His tone was wry. "No one commands everything with ease. We present confidence because leadership demands it. But inside, we're just as prone to uncertainties." A moment of quiet passed, the air charged with unspoken parallels. Natalie sensed how drastically her perspective on Adrian had changed. He wasn't simply the aloof, powerful CEO. There was depth and empathy behind that polished exterior. She cleared her throat softly, shifting the mood. Well, I guess I should recap the rest of the day. After finance, I joined HR a bit more, and I got to do a small data entry project with them. Then I had the conversation with Jacob, which ended fine. A shy smile tugged at her lips. I've accepted that not everyone will greet me with open arms right away. He nodded, serious again. That's realistic. Corporate culture, even a decent one, can breed caution. But hopefully, your sincerity will disarm them over time. They talked a bit longer about the other projects in motion, from the upcoming expansion plans to a philanthropic event Adrian wanted her to attend. He asked if she'd met Trevor in PR. Apparently, Trevor had pitched some campaign ideas to Adrian earlier that day. She recounted the flamboyant brand strategist's style, eliciting another quiet laugh from Adrian. Trevor's creative mind is priceless, he observed. But keep an eye on him. He's unstoppable once he has an idea. I rely on people like you to keep him grounded. I'll try, she replied, grinning. He made it sound like everything in PR is a whirlwind of slogans and deadlines. More or less. The real test is how well they pivot under pressure. With expansions come new product launches, new messaging strategies. Trevor's team will be at the forefront. He checked the time on a sleek watch. Almost 7 now, the rest of the building likely emptying. Natalie felt the day's exhaustion creeping in, yet she was reluctant to end this conversation. The air in Adrian's office had an intimacy, a sense of collaboration that felt more personal than any she'd had in a workplace. Finally, Adrian stood, signaling a soft wrap-up. I don't want to keep you too late. Day 1 has been intense enough. But well done, truly. Tomorrow will bring new tasks. Ms. Pryor will confirm your schedule, but I'd like to speak again around midday. Just a quick pulse check to ensure you're settling into your next assignment. She stood, gathering her bag and phone. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. He accompanied her to the door, that subtle courtesy she was coming to associate with him. I'll see you in the morning, or at lunch. Get some rest, Natalie. Good night, Mr. Adrian, she said, catching herself before reverting to formality. His reaction was a fleeting but genuine smile. Good night. Exiting into the quiet corridor, she found Leonard gone for the evening. Alone, she pressed the elevator button, replaying the conversation in her head, especially the moment he'd offered a glimmer of his own early fears, how he'd faced skepticism from older executives. It struck her that, ironically, they shared an experience of forging trust in a realm where others saw them as outsiders. She slipped into the elevator, stepping off in the lobby. Outside, the city's nighttime rhythm pulsed. Traffic lights, pedestrians heading home or out to dinner, the swirl of headlights. Natalie inhaled the summer air. Already she felt changed, as though the day's challenges and connections had lit a spark of confidence she hadn't expected. She was determined to prove that Adrian's instinct about her wasn't misplaced. Riding the subway back to her humble studio apartment, she leaned against the window, eyes drifting over the subterranean stations flickering by. Thoughts of Adrian rose unbidden, not only in a professional sense, her admiration for his leadership style, his curiosity, that careful warmth, but also something more personal. She chided herself not to read too deeply into subtle moments. He was her boss, after all, her mentor. Yet she couldn't deny the quiet thrill she felt in his presence, the way he spoke her name with that reassuring calm, how he let her see a fragment of his own uncertainties, how it felt oddly natural to confide in him. A voice inside whispered caution. Office relationships could be complicated, especially with such a powerful figure. Still, she felt a stirring sense that something intangible hovered between them. When she finally reached home, she set her bag down and flipped on a single lamp, the dim glow revealing her cramped but cozy living space. She towed off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch, letting the day's memories wash over her. Every step had been intense, and tomorrow would bring more. Her phone buzzed, an automated message from the system listing her schedule for the next day. She scanned it, noting departmental visits. Instead of dread, she felt a spark of anticipation. She placed the phone aside, letting her mind drift. A fleeting image returned. Adrian's relaxed posture, perched on the edge of his desk, telling her he believed in her. Suddenly, the future felt brighter and more uncertain than ever before. But in that uncertainty, she sensed hope and possibility. She fell asleep with a small smile on her lips, silently thanking whatever twist of fate had guided her into that elevator. Even if this was just the beginning, it already felt like the start of something extraordinary. Natalie woke up the next day feeling equal parts eager and anxious. Her alarm chimed insistently in the early dawn, and she groaned, batting her bedside table to silence it. Still, the flicker of excitement she'd felt the night before lingered, an undercurrent of energy urging her forward. Today was officially her second day as Adrian Morgan's apprentice, and the schedule on her phone promised a deep dive into the public relations floor. She tugged on a simple blouse and slacks, struggling to iron out every wrinkle under her old, sputtering iron. Her reflection in the mirror looked tired but resolute, a small reminder that she was entering a world that demanded poise from the moment she stepped into that corporate lobby. On the subway ride, she skimmed emails and daydreamed about how the day would unfold. Trevor from PR had already sent a flamboyant message last night. "Can't wait to brainstorm with our new protege. Bring your wits and your best ideas. We have a brand conundrum to tackle." Just reading his note made her smile. She could practically hear his enthusiastic voice in every exclamation mark. Arriving at Morgan & Co.'s skyscraper, she navigated the lobby's morning rush more confidently than before, flashing her new staff badge to the guard at the security desk. A curious flutter sprang up as she neared the private elevator bank. The memory of her first accidental ride was still sharp, but now she had the proper credentials and no longer felt like a trespasser. When she reached the 65th floor reception, she half expected to see Adrian, but Leonard greeted her instead, a polite smile creasing his features. "Good morning, Ms. Jennings," he said softly. "Mr. Morgan is in a meeting with the board at the moment. He asked me to let you know he'll see you around noon. In the meantime, here's a folder with briefing materials for you. He recommends you head straight to the public relations floor to begin your day." She thanked him, taking the slim black folder. It carried a faint imprint of the Morgan & Co. logo embossed in silver. Inside were several printed documents, each summarizing ongoing brand strategies, upcoming campaigns, and an internal PR calendar. She leafed through them quickly, impressed by the level of detail. Nodding to Leonard, she made her way back to the elevator. Surreal how easily she flitted between the pinnacle of the tower and the hustle below now. She stepped off on the 21st floor, greeted instantly by a swirl of color and sound. "Natalie!" Trevor's voice rang out in sing-song fashion as soon as she stepped through the glass doors marked Public Relations and Communications. He bounded over, wearing a bold polka-dot tie that perfectly matched the eclectic vibe of the space. "I was just talking about you. Glad you came early." She returned his grin. "I'm excited to see what you have in store. Mr. Morgan said I should start here first thing?" "Well, welcome to the PR jungle," Trevor teased, motioning for her to follow him into a large open area lined with whiteboards. Several staff members were writing bullet points, sketching flowcharts, and debating ideas with animated expressions. Posters of past campaigns hung on the walls, some featuring the Morgan & Co. logo, others showcasing charity initiatives. "Gather round, folks," Trevor announced with playful flair, clapping his hands. "This is Natalie, the new apprentice under Mr. Morgan. She'll be observing our process today and hopefully tossing in some brilliant ideas of her own." The team turned to greet her with a chorus of welcoming nods. One woman in a cobalt blazer introduced herself as Layla, the department's media relations lead. Another man named Scott gave a short wave from behind a tall stack of mock-up designs. It was a stark contrast to operations' rigid formality. Here, creativity reigned. "All right, everyone, back to the problem at hand," Trevor said, pointing to a note scribbled across the board. "Brand Expansion Challenge. New Regions. We have to figure out how best to introduce our brand to 2 new international markets, each with its own cultural sensitivities. We want to stand out without feeling like another Western import. Natalie stepped closer, reading the bullet points. Region A. Conservative values, emphasis on trust and tradition. Region B. Youthful demographic, fast-paced trends, huge social media usage. Trevor shot her a conspiratorial smile. So, Natalie, got any thoughts on how Morgan & Co. should approach this? She hesitated, scanning the notes. Well, for Region A, maybe focusing on longevity and legacy might resonate. Show the history of Morgan & Co., emphasize integrity and community investments. Trevor's eyes lit up. Yes, I like the angle of legacy. Continue. Feeling slightly more confident, she gestured toward the second bullet. Region B is all about fast trends, maybe short, catchy campaigns using local influencers on social media, something fun and fresh, highlighting how Morgan & Co. innovates constantly. Spot on, he cheered, scribbling her suggestions onto the board. We need something that can speak 2 different languages, literally and figuratively. Anyone else? He spun around to the team, who nodded approvingly. Those are good starting points, Layla chimed in. For Region B, we could do interactive Instagram reels. Maybe a day in the life of a Morgan & Co. intern from a local angle. Build authenticity. Trevor bounced on his toes. Yes, this is what I love. Ideas that spark more ideas. He turned to Natalie. Look at that. You're already adding value. Mr. Morgan will be proud. Heat rose in her cheeks, but she laughed softly. I'm just brainstorming. You all do this for a living. An hour flew by in energetic back-and-forth discussions. The team refined rough concepts, scribbling arrows and crossing out lines of text until the whiteboard was a chaotic masterpiece of possibility. Natalie tried to absorb everything. How they tested each idea against potential pitfalls, how they mixed serious brand values with playful executions, and how each person contributed a unique perspective. Finally, Trevor called for a short break. The team dispersed, some rushing to the coffee station, others typing furiously on laptops. Natalie was about to find water when Trevor took her elbow gently. You're a natural here, you know, he whispered conspiratorially. Don't think we won't try to recruit you permanently after your apprenticeship. She smiled at the compliment. I'm flattered, but I'm supposed to learn every department first. No favorites yet. He chuckled. Fair enough. Well, if you ever need a buddy in the place, remember I'm here. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed. She fished it out, an alert from Adrian's office. A. Morgan. Meeting ended early. Can you come upstairs for a brief update? Her heart fluttered. Early? It wasn't even noon. She typed a quick acknowledgement. Trevor, that's my cue. Mr. Morgan wants me upstairs. He gave a theatrical gasp. Ooh, the big boss calls. Go! We'll keep plugging away here. She thanked him and slipped away, heading to the elevators with a bright sense of accomplishment. Already she saw how different departments interfaced. PR needed sign-off from operations on budgets, from finance on expense projections, and from the exec suite for final branding. She pictured the entire company as a living puzzle, just like Adrian had described. Riding the elevator up to 65 felt increasingly natural. Stepping into the hushed reception area, she spotted Leonard again, who waved her forward. Mr. Morgan is free now, Ms. Jennings. She slipped into Adrian's office, finding him behind the desk this time, poring over some documents. He glanced up with a small smile. You're early, which is perfect. You ended sooner than expected? She asked, approaching his desk. He nodded, gesturing to a nearby seat. The board meeting was relatively smooth, less pushback than usual. He tidied a stack of papers, then folded his hands on the desk's surface. So tell me, how's PR treating you? Her tone brimmed with enthusiasm. It's fantastic, vibrant, creative. They were working on branding strategies for new regions. I even tossed in a couple of thoughts. They seemed to like them. Adrian's expression brightened with genuine interest. I'm not surprised. You have an intuitive feel for messaging, I think. He reached for a folder. I've got some materials here detailing our current brand pillars in case you want more context. I believe Trevor and Layla are referencing them. She accepted the folder, scanning the headings. Authenticity, legacy, innovation, social responsibility. It was neat seeing how a giant corporation boiled its identity down to core concepts. Adrian leaned back in his chair. I called you up partly to discuss your schedule for tomorrow. Jacob in operations has a heavy day planned and wants to ensure you're not caught in the crossfire. She recalled Jacob's warning about an intense project launch. I appreciate him looking out for me, she said. Yes. He's asked if you can join him early next week instead, once a few crises settle. That means tomorrow could be open for a deeper dive in finance or PR, unless you'd like a day with HR or legal. Natalie considered. Finance was fascinating, but I feel like I only scratched the surface in PR. If it's okay with you, maybe I'll stick with PR a bit longer. Help them shape those campaigns, see the process through. Adrian nodded, satisfied. Makes sense. Trevor's likely to appreciate a second brain. Just be ready. He can rope you into late-night brainstorming if he's on a creative role. She chuckled. Noted. They discussed a few more details, from HR's upcoming orientation sessions to a lunch meeting Adrian suggested she attend next week. At times, their conversation felt strictly business. At others, it lapsed into a comfortable camaraderie that still caught Natalie by surprise. She recalled the curiosity and warmth she'd glimpsed in him the night before, recognizing how it lingered behind his professional composure. Eventually, he glanced at the clock. I have another meeting soon. Any immediate questions or concerns? She shook her head gently. No, I'm good for now. Thank you for giving me this direction. I'm enjoying it. He rose, walking around to escort her to the door once more, a habit she noticed he maintained as though ensuring every conversation ended on a personable note. Keep me posted on what you see down there, and if anything feels off, come talk to me. Of course, she said, offering him a small, genuine smile. I appreciate the open door. Exiting the office, she nearly collided with Ms. Pryor, who was waiting outside. The attorney smiled. My turn, I guess. We have some legal reviews to go over. Natalie excused herself with a quick wave, heading down to the elevator again. Her heart was light. She'd become aware of how seamlessly she fit into the building's flow. Each passing hour chipped away at her initial nervousness and replaced it with a sense of belonging. Returning to the 21st floor, she dove back into the PR realm, rejoining Trevor's team for a lively brainstorming session. Ideas flew across the table, some wacky, some brilliant. They teased her affectionately for being the boss's new muse, but the tone stayed friendly, not mean-spirited. She sensed genuine camaraderie. They broke for lunch around 1 o'clock, grabbing sandwiches in a colorful lounge. Laughter punctuated their conversation, making Natalie feel as if she'd been there for months instead of just 2 days. The team's banter circled around upcoming campaigns, office gossip, and rumors about expansions overseas. When the afternoon ticked onward, Trevor pulled Natalie aside. Layla and I are prepping a pitch deck for next Tuesday. Could you help polish the final slides? Your outside perspective might catch something we missed. She agreed, excited for hands-on work. They parked themselves in front of a large monitor, clicking through slides, everything from brand mission statements to visuals and mock taglines. Natalie pointed out areas that seemed too text-heavy or suggested clarifying a bullet point for clarity. The hours slipped by in a satisfying blur until at last, 5:30 rolled around. Trevor groaned dramatically. Ugh, I guess we can pick this up tomorrow. Some of us are humans, not corporate robots. She laughed. We made good progress, though. I'll tweak a few sections tonight if you want. I'm still adjusting to the idea of working on such a big campaign. He tapped her shoulder good-naturedly. I trust you, Natalie. This is shaping up nicely. Let's meet first thing tomorrow to finalize. They parted ways and Natalie gathered her belongings, heading to the elevators. She wasn't scheduled for an evening debrief with Adrian today. He'd said he was busy at a working dinner, though he might message her if time freed up. Still, a small pang of disappointment needled her as she realized she likely wouldn't see him again until morning. Shaking off the feeling, she reminded herself that the apprenticeship was about learning the business, not clinging to the CEO's presence every spare moment. Yet the thought of their quietly charged conversations returned to her, stirring both admiration and caution. She knew lines existed: boss and mentee, teacher and student, CEO and junior staff. Downstairs in the lobby, the diminishing crowd reflected the day's end. Natalie found herself smiling at how quickly she was adapting to this pace. A tiny voice in her mind marveled at how close she felt to an epicenter of corporate power. Adrian might be out of reach tonight, but the echo of his guidance lingered in her mind. She stepped onto the street, where the summer evening offered a warm breeze. Flagging a bus toward her apartment, she let the city lights blur past the window, her thoughts full of tomorrow's to-do list, and the deeper sense of purpose stirring in her. Just 2 days in, and she already felt a part of something dynamic, shaped by people who trusted her ideas. And guiding everything behind the scenes was Adrian, whose steady confidence in her abilities made her want to rise to each challenge. Exiting the bus near her street, she walked the last block with a slow, thoughtful stride. Life could change in a blink, and here she was, on a track she'd never imagined. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Natalie clutched that sense of possibility close, determined not to let self-doubt spoil the promise of what might be waiting in the days ahead. Natalie's third morning at Morgan & Co. dawned with a swirl of anticipation. She had slept better, her anxious excitement tempered now by a growing confidence that she could handle whatever the day threw at her. Her phone's alarm chimed at dawn and she sat up, stretching away the lingering fatigue. Outside her window, the sun was just peeking over the neighboring buildings, bathing the urban skyline in shades of gold. She dressed quickly, another carefully pressed blouse and a modest pencil skirt. Her tiny mirror showed a determined face, eyes bright with purpose. The swirl of the previous days still danced in her thoughts. Trevor's flamboyant enthusiasm in PR, Candace's friendly thoroughness in finance, Jacob's protective stance in operations, and above it all, Adrian's calm mentorship, his conviction that she could bridge these worlds, glean insights, and maybe help refine the puzzle that was Morgan & Co. The subway ride was smoother that morning, her second-hand leather flats no longer causing blisters, and her grip on the overhead rail more relaxed. She mentally ran through the day's schedule, a full day in public relations again, finalizing the brand pitch deck with Trevor and Layla. Then, after her tasks, Adrian had requested she attend a philanthropic event in the evening, a fundraiser Morgan & Co. was co-sponsoring for an education initiative. She'd never been to such a high-profile function, but Ms. Pryor had hinted it was a chance to see another facet of the company's operations. Before she knew it, she was striding through the towering lobby of Morgan & Co., flashing her staff badge, and riding the elevator to the 21st floor. She stepped out into the PR realm right behind two other employees, catching fragments of their conversation about a media blitz planned for next month. "Morning, everyone," Natalie called, setting her bag at a spare desk in the open office area that the PR team had informally assigned to her. She glimpsed Trevor across the room, hunched over a laptop with furrowed brows. He caught her eye and beckoned wildly. "Natalie, you're here! Perfect timing!" he exclaimed, voice carrying above the bustle. "We have a mini crisis. One of the visuals we prepared for the brand deck is apparently not clearing legal or licensing. Layla's about to blow a fuse." Natalie wove through the rows of desks to where Layla stood, arms folded, scowling at a draft poster displayed on a large monitor. The poster depicted Morgan & Cober's products superimposed over a scenic cityscape, with bold text praising global unity and innovation. "It's a licensing issue with the photograph," Layla explained tersely, glancing at Natalie. "The skyline in the background belongs to a city that has strict commercial usage policies. We either need to pay extra for a license or swap the image entirely. Doing it last minute is a headache." Trevor leaned in, shaking his head. "We had no idea the city trademarked its skyline so heavily. I guess we should have done a thorough check earlier." Natalie studied the poster. "Could we replace that skyline with a generic silhouette or a free licensed image? Then rework the text so it's not referencing that city specifically?" Layla brightened marginally. "That's probably our best bet. The pitch deck goes to Adrian tomorrow for a final look, so we can't risk using an unlicensed asset." Trevor clapped his hands once, decisive. "Perfect solution, let's do it. Natalie, you good at hunting down high-res images with correct usage rights?" She nodded. "I've done a bit of that at my old startup. Let me see what we can find." And so began an impromptu morning scramble. Layla and Trevor finessed the text, while Natalie combed through image libraries, verifying usage licenses. She downloaded half a dozen potential city silhouettes that evoked a modern, global feel, carefully reading the fine print. Each time she found one that looked promising, she flagged it for Layla to evaluate. Between sips of coffee and the frantic hammering of keys, the PR team managed to finalize a new visual that the in-house design staff could tweak. By 10 o'clock, they had a polished draft ready to go. Layla exhaled in relief. "Crisis averted," she murmured, giving Natalie a grateful nod. "That's how PR is," Trevor declared, spinning in his swivel chair. Moments of panic followed by triumphant last-minute saves. "You, Ms. Jennings, handled that like a pro." Natalie smiled. "I'm just glad we caught the issue before the presentation." With the urgent matter settled, the team convened near the whiteboard, reviewing the rest of the deck. The new visuals seamlessly replaced the questionable skyline, and the slogans had been refined to incorporate the brand pillars Adrian mentioned: authenticity, legacy, innovation, and social responsibility. Natalie found herself citing bits of the brand guidelines he'd given her, which elicited impressed looks from her co-workers. Layla nodded, satisfied. "We'll finalize the pitch for Adrian tomorrow. Maybe you can be in the meeting too, Natalie, since you helped shape this." Natalie's heart fluttered at the idea. Sitting in a real pitch meeting with Adrian Morgan? It felt surreal, yet she managed a calm smile. "I'd be honored. I'll check with him." They broke around 11 for coffee refills. Natalie used the lull to message Ms. Pryor about the philanthropic event that evening. She wanted to confirm details: dress code, timing, location. A minute later, the attorney replied, "It's semi-formal. At the Bellevue Hotel's Grand Ballroom, 6:30 p.m. You'll be on the guest list under Morgan & Co.'s. Just check in at the reception table. Mr. Morgan will meet you there." Reading that last line, "Mr. Morgan will meet you there," sent a ripple of nerves through Natalie. She'd never attended a philanthropic gala, let alone with the CEO. She typed back a quick thanks, then tapped out a message to Adrian. "Thanks for the invitation. I'll be there at 6:30. Let me know if there's anything specific I should prepare." His reply arrived while she was sipping coffee. "No extra prep needed. Just bring yourself. We can discuss the broader philanthropic strategy if you're curious. See you tonight." Her cheeks warmed at the casual friendliness in his words. She tucked her phone away, forcing herself to stay focused on PR tasks. Yet her mind spun with how to handle an evening function in semi-formal attire. She owned exactly one decent cocktail dress, a simple black piece that might pass muster if she paired it with tasteful flats. She swallowed, glancing at the clock. Time to do a bit more work before she could slip out early to change. The midday hours flew by in a rush of minor tasks, polishing the brand deck, replying to internal emails, and even stepping into a brief departmental huddle. Around 2 in the afternoon, Trevor breezed over, carrying his laptop. "Nat, can I snag you? We need fresh eyes on an email pitch for a potential influencer partnership." She nodded, following him to a small corner workstation. They spent half an hour tweaking the language to ensure it struck a balance between sincerity and hype. By the end, Trevor's flamboyant style was tempered by Natalie's straightforward revisions, yielding a neat draft. At 3:30, her phone buzzed with a reminder. Philanthropic event. Leave building by 5:15 to dress. She'd set the alert to ensure she had enough time to commute home, change, and get to the hotel by 6:30. She liked to be punctual, especially for something involving Adrian. Before leaving for the day, she popped by finance to quickly greet Candace, who was finishing the quarter's financial summaries. Candace waved from behind her stack of folders. "You're dashing off?" "Gotta attend some philanthropic event tonight," Natalie explained. "I'll be back bright and early tomorrow." Candace grinned. "Look at you, Ms. Fancy Apprentice. Have fun rubbing elbows with the bigwigs." Natalie laughed, but her heart fluttered. "I'm not sure about fun, but it'll be interesting." She clocked out around 5, feeling a small surge of relief. The day had been hectic, but she'd accomplished a lot. With little time to spare, she hurried to the subway, weaving through downtown foot traffic until she reached her modest apartment. Inside, she did a whirlwind transformation. She hung her work clothes and pulled out the simple black cocktail dress. She hadn't worn it in ages. She'd bought it at a discount store for a friend's wedding, if memory served. She smoothed the fabric, checking for wrinkles or loose threads. There was a small snag near the hem, but hardly noticeable. Her reflection in the mirror showed a slight figure, the dress hugging her softly at the waist. She added a slim belt for flair, then rummaged for her best pair of low heels, shiny but comfortable enough for an evening on her feet. Finally, she tied her hair half up, half down, letting a few strands frame her face. A bit more mascara and a neutral lip color finished the look. The result was understated but polished. She wasn't exactly a socialite, but she hoped it would suffice for a philanthropic gala. She grabbed a small clutch, made sure her phone and ID were inside, then dashed out to catch a taxi. The Bellevue Hotel was a grand, ornate structure with a sweeping staircase leading to an opulent foyer. Well-dressed guests milled about, chatting and sipping champagne under crystal chandeliers. Natalie took a moment to steady her pulse before stepping up to the reception table. "Good evening," she said quietly. "I'm Natalie Jennings with Morgan & Co." The woman at the table scanned a list. "Yes, here you are, our philanthropic sponsor list. Thank you for coming. The event is in the grand ballroom just through those doors." Inside the ballroom was a vision of elegance. Round tables draped in white linens, tall floral centerpieces, and soft music from a live quartet. Attendees ranged from corporate figures to city officials, with a smattering of celebrity philanthropists circulating. Natalie felt a pang of self-consciousness, clinging to the edges of the room, scanning for a familiar face. She spotted Ms. Pryor engaged in polite conversation near a buffet table. The attorney waved discreetly, then resumed her discussion. Just as Natalie debated approaching her, she heard a familiar voice at her shoulder. "Natalie," Adrian said, and she turned to see him in a tailored midnight blue suit, tie impeccable, posture poised. He looked every inch the confident CEO, yet the warmth in his greeting made her heart flip. "Mr. Morgan," she returned, the formal address slipping out of habit. He paused, faint amusement touching his features. "We're off the clock, maybe just Adrian tonight?" She flushed lightly. "Sorry." "Adrian," she corrected, offering a small smile. He gestured around them. "Thank you for coming. I know it's short notice. I wanted you to see how our philanthropic arm ties into everything." She nodded, noticing how other attendees cast curious glances their way. Some recognized Adrian Morgan instantly, but few recognized her. "I'm glad to be here. It's my first event like this." He placed a guiding hand briefly at her elbow, steering her away from the entrance so they could talk more privately. "We typically raise funds for educational programs. Tonight's specifically for scholarships in underprivileged communities. Morgan & Co. is a headline donor." Her gaze scanned the crowd, noticing a stage at the front where a microphone stood. "Will you be speaking?" He inclined his head in a mild shrug. "A short address, yes. It's customary. After that, the floor is open for socializing. Pledges, networking, silent auctions. There's also dinner for those who choose to stay longer. As if on cue, an older gentleman in a suit approached, greeting Adrian with warmth. "Morgan, good to see you. And who is this lovely young lady?" Natalie tensed momentarily, but Adrian's response was smooth. "This is Natalie Jennings. She's part of our executive apprenticeship program. I wanted her to experience this side of our work." The gentleman flashed a friendly smile. "Ah, well, we're always happy to welcome new faces to the philanthropic fold. Pleasure to meet you." She managed a polite greeting, and the conversation drifted into details about the scholarship beneficiaries. Natalie mostly listened, gleaning how Morgan & Co. planned to channel funds and resources into local programs. Adrian occasionally turned the discussion her way, inviting her perspective on how such philanthropic efforts complemented their brand image. She answered as best she could, leaning on the insights she'd gleaned from PR discussions. Soon, other donors and business associates approached, forming small clusters of conversation. Natalie found herself standing beside Adrian as he deftly navigated the social sphere. She admired how skillfully he balanced philanthropic enthusiasm with gentle corporate diplomacy. Periodically, he introduced her, explaining her role in broad strokes. It was an eye-opening experience, seeing how the philanthropic brand messaging they'd refined in PR found real-world footing here. Guests praised Morgan & Co. for not only writing checks but also providing mentorship and job opportunities. She understood better than ever that everything was interlinked: public image, core values, and actual community impact. After a half hour of mingling, the lights flickered in a subtle cue. A host stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, announcing the start of the formal addresses. Adrian gave Natalie a slight nod and excused himself to make his way to the podium. She slipped into a seat at one of the round tables near the front, heart fluttering with curiosity. His speech was concise yet resonant. He spoke about opportunity, the importance of nurturing talent in underprivileged areas, and how Morgan & Co. believed in giving back meaningfully. Natalie watched him with a keen sense of pride, recalling how his own father had founded the firm on more traditional principles, and how Adrian had modernized it while holding on to a sense of responsibility. As he stepped down to polite applause, she clapped too, a small smile alight on her face. She sensed that if the rest of the company was the engine, philanthropic efforts like this were the soul. He found her in the crowd again, returning to her side with an unspoken question in his eyes. "What did you think?" She rose slightly from her seat to lean toward him, speaking quietly over the lull in the program. "It was inspiring, short but powerful. I can see how everything ties together." His expression softened. "I'm glad. After dinner, I'd like you to meet some of our scholarship recipients, if you're willing." She nodded, her stomach fluttering. "I'd love that." In that moment, as the event carried on around them with clinking glasses and hushed conversations, Natalie felt again the subtle bond forming between them, a mentor-mentee connection, yes, but laced with mutual admiration. She glimpsed in Adrian the same sincerity she'd felt since that accidental elevator ride, a leader who wanted to do more than just profit. The night was still young, and she realized she stood on yet another threshold, seeing a side of the corporate world where suits and philanthropic ideals merged, where personal convictions shaped reputations, and where, perhaps, an unexpected closeness with her CEO might grow. She smoothed the skirt of her simple black dress, preparing for the next conversation, the next handshake, and the next glimpse into Adrian Morgan's layered world. Natalie lingered at her table as the fundraisers program segued from the opening remarks into dinner service. Around her, elegantly dressed attendees chatted softly, the gentle clink of silverware providing a subtle background rhythm. A discreet waitstaff circulated with trays of appetizers, delicate canapés, seasonal soup, and fresh bread. It was far more upscale than anything she'd experienced before, and she took a moment to steady her breath, recalling that she was here on professional duties. Adrian stood nearby, speaking with a pair of city officials. From her vantage point, she could see him in profile, poised, gracious in his manner, a faint smile playing at his lips. The memory of his short but resonant speech lingered in her mind, underscoring how vital Morgan & Co.'s philanthropic commitments were to him and apparently to the community. The city officials nodded earnestly, each occasionally casting a curious glance her way. She wondered if they were asking about the apprenticeship or about her presence at his side. Catching her gaze, Adrian subtly motioned for her to join them. Natalie smoothed the skirt of her black dress, wove past a cluster of chatting donors, and arrived at his elbow, heart fluttering just a bit. He introduced her with warm confidence. "This is Natalie Jennings, one of our newer team members," Adrian said. "She's here to see how we connect our philanthropic work to the company's broader vision." The officials, Mr. Tate and Ms. Rowland, as Adrian introduced them, offered friendly handshakes. "Delighted to meet you," Ms. Rowland said. "We've been impressed by Morgan & Co.'s scholarship initiative. I hear you're personally involved in understanding all facets of the company." Natalie gave a modest nod. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Morgan believes I should see every aspect, including how philanthropic efforts shape our culture and mission." Adrian shot her a brief smile of approval. She felt a spark of pride, relieved she'd found the right words. The city officials asked a few questions about her role, which she answered politely. Then Ms. Rowland pivoted back to Adrian, mentioning a community center project. They dove into logistical details, leaving Natalie to observe how Adrian calmly navigated the conversation, offering resources, referencing budget constraints, promising to connect them with the relevant Morgan & Co. manager. It was a masterclass in balancing compassion with realism. As the officials excused themselves for dinner, Adrian turned his attention back to Natalie. "Why don't we sit?" he suggested, gesturing to a table in the quieter corner of the ballroom. "Dinner's starting, and I'd like to introduce you to a few scholarship recipients afterward." She agreed, and they settled at a table near a large window draped in thick velvet curtains. The night sky beyond was dotted with city lights, blending with the warm glow of chandeliers inside. A server approached, pouring water and wine. Natalie declined the wine for now, suspecting she needed a clear head. Adrian, however, accepted a small pour, swirling the glass thoughtfully before taking a sip. "I hope you're not overwhelmed," he said, noticing her swift glance at the many social circles forming around the room. "I know these gatherings can be intense." She smiled wryly. "It's definitely a new environment for me, but I see how vital it is to network, to reinforce the relationships that power these initiatives." He nodded, relaxing into conversation. "People sometimes dismiss galas as pageantry, but we do raise substantial funds, and it keeps donors engaged year-round. Beyond the glitz, real connections are formed, connections that often translate into action." She glanced around, noticing a few Morgan & Co. employees among the crowd, each mingling with philanthropic partners or local leaders. A sense of pride in the company's multifaceted approach took root in her. "It's impressive," she said softly. "Not just tossing checks at causes, but building relationships." Adrian's expression gentled. "It's something I wanted to expand after taking over. My father was generous, but mostly behind the scenes. I believe in a more visible commitment. It encourages others to join, fosters accountability, and shows that businesses aren't just about profit." Their conversation paused as a server placed dinner plates in front of them, herb-crusted salmon with seasonal vegetables, arranged artfully on fine china. Natalie cut into her meal, the savory aroma making her realize she was hungrier than she'd expected. The tension she'd felt earlier eased as she and Adrian ate, occasionally exchanging remarks about the event's decor or the guests they'd met. When the plates were cleared, Adrian checked his watch. "Give me a moment. I'll bring someone over who's a beneficiary of our scholarship program. You can hear their perspective directly. I think it'll enrich your understanding of why we do this. He rose, gliding into the throng of attendees. Natalie took a calming breath, scanning the ballroom once more. She caught a glimpse of Ms. Pryor talking animatedly with a small group, perhaps other legal professionals. At another table, she spotted a local news anchor sipping champagne, likely covering the event for a segment on community contributions. Within a few minutes, Adrian returned with a petite young woman in a modest navy dress. "Natalie, this is Simone. She's in her second year of college on our scholarship." He offered Simone a seat. "Simone, why don't you share your story?" Simone looked a bit shy, yet a spark of confidence glimmered in her eyes. "Sure. My parents immigrated here when I was small. They worked multiple jobs to keep food on the table. I always dreamed of college, but financially it seemed out of reach. Then I learned about the Morgan & Co. scholarship for first-generation students. Without it, I couldn't afford tuition. Now I'm majoring in engineering." "That's wonderful," Natalie said, touched by her sincerity. "Congratulations on your progress. Are you enjoying your studies?" Simone nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, it's challenging, but I feel so motivated. And being awarded this scholarship wasn't just money. It came with mentorship from employees at Morgan & Co. They helped me with internships, networking, guiding me on professional paths. It's life-changing." A lump formed in Natalie's throat. Hearing firsthand how these philanthropic initiatives transformed a life gave context to all the brand messaging she'd seen in PR. "That's incredible," she said softly. "I'm glad you're thriving." Simone beamed. "Me too. And it's not just me. There are dozens of us, all different majors and backgrounds. Some are studying business, others nursing, law, environmental science. The scholarship fosters a community that's really supportive." Adrian listened with quiet pride, arms loosely folded. "I remember meeting Simone at the program's orientation," he said. "She spoke so passionately about wanting to build devices to help disabled communities. That stuck with me." Simone blushed. "I still want to do that. Robotics or biomedical engineering, something that improves quality of life." Natalie marveled at the synergy between Simone's ambition and Adrian's philanthropic vision, a living example of how the corporate sphere could bolster personal dreams. "Thank you for sharing, Simone," she said earnestly. "Hearing your experience makes my own work feel more meaningful." They chatted a bit longer, exchanging contact details so Natalie could put Simone in touch with the PR team for a possible feature story. Then the young student excused herself to mingle with other scholarship recipients. Left alone at the table with Adrian again, Natalie exhaled, her voice hushed. "This is why I see such passion in your employees, isn't it? There's real impact behind the corporate facade." He gave a thoughtful nod. "Yes, I won't pretend every single person in the company is driven by altruism, but the culture we cultivate, transparency, community engagement, breeds loyalty and purpose." She set down her glass of water. "When I first arrived, I thought it was about me learning administrative tasks. But I'm realizing it's bigger. You're not just teaching me how Morgan & Co. operates, you're showing me its heartbeat." His gaze warmed, and for a moment, the bustling ballroom faded. "That was the intention," he said quietly, just for her ears. "You need to see the whole tapestry if you're going to help weave it." A swirl of emotion fluttered in her chest, admiration, gratitude, and a touch of something else that she hesitated to name. She reminded herself, "He's your mentor, your CEO. There's a line." Yet the sincerity in his eyes pulled at her, as if forging a deeper bond. The band began playing soft music as a hint for guests to dance or socialize further. A few couples drifted to the center of the ballroom, swaying gently. Adrian followed her gaze, then glanced back at her. "Do you dance?" he asked, tone polite but laced with invitation. Her heart gave a surprised leap. "Not well," she admitted with a timid laugh. "A little, maybe." "Me neither," he confessed softly, an almost boyish grin forming. "But sometimes it's nice to step away from the business talk for a few minutes." She hesitated, scanning the elegant swirl of gowns and suits on the dance floor. Why not? She thought, pulses of nerves and curiosity mingling. She nodded. All right, let's give it a try. Adrian stood, extending his hand with a quiet confidence. She rose too, letting him guide her to the edge of the small dance area. The music was slow, a gentle melody that invited close steps without the complexity of a fast tempo. He placed one hand lightly at her waist, the other enveloping her fingers. She was keenly aware of how many people in the room might be watching, yet the moment felt oddly private, as if they were in a cocoon of soft music and shared purpose. They began to sway, just barely shifting their feet. Adrian, for all his claims of not dancing well, carried a smooth composure, guiding her movements gently. She let herself relax, focusing on the hush of the moment. For an instant, she recalled their first meeting, accidentally stepping into his private elevator, feeling so out of place. Now, here she was, dancing in a quiet corner of a philanthropic gala by his side. His voice was almost a whisper against the melody. Thank you for being open to all this, for diving into each department, for meeting scholarship recipients, for trusting this process. She tilted her head just enough to glimpse his expression. I'm grateful you gave me the chance, she said, her heart fluttering. It's changed my life already. Their eyes locked for a moment, and an unspoken current passed between them. The warmth of his hand on hers, the faint brush of their clothes, an unexpected intimacy. She felt her pulse quicken, uncertain if he sensed it too. Too soon, the song drew to a close. Applause from the surrounding tables signaled the band's success in coaxing some guests to dance. Adrian released her gently, stepping back with a composed nod. She lowered her gaze, cheeks warming. They returned to their seats, each momentarily at a loss for words. Before they could speak, Ms. Pryor approached with a bright smile. Mr. Morgan, Natalie, I wanted to introduce you to a representative from the mayor's office. She gestured to a tall, polished woman stepping forward. He's been eager to discuss the next scholarship round. And just like that, they were pulled back into the swirl of professional conversation. Adrian effortlessly shifted gears, greeting the representative with his usual calm authority. Natalie found herself fielding a question or two, describing how the brand's philanthropic identity might evolve. Though her mind was still half-lodged in the warmth of that dance, she managed coherent, polite replies. The rest of the evening passed in a graceful tide of introductions, handshakes, and discussions about upcoming programs. Yet through it all, an awareness lingered between Natalie and Adrian, some shared thread that had emerged when they ventured onto the dance floor. At last, guests began to trickle out, satisfied with the night's fundraising progress. The silent auction ended, the band finished its last tune, and tables emptied. Adrian checked his watch, then glanced at Natalie. It's getting late, he said kindly. Can I help arrange a car back to your place? She hesitated. Oh, I can take a taxi, truly. You've already done so much. His expression brooked no argument. I'd feel better ensuring you get home safely. Please, let me handle it. She relented, appreciating his concern. After a round of farewells to Ms. Pryor and several donors, they made their way to the hotel's grand foyer. Adrian placed a brief phone call, and moments later, a sleek town car pulled up to the curb. He opened the back door for her, the city's lights shimmering beyond. Thank you, she murmured, stepping inside. She turned, expecting him to follow, but he merely leaned down, resting an arm on the open door. I'll stay a bit longer to finalize a few things. Driver will take you safely, Adrian said, a faint smile touching his lips. I'll see you in the office tomorrow. Good work tonight, Natalie. Her heart clenched at the warmth in his tone. Good night, she said softly. The door closed and she sank into the leather seat as the driver pulled away from the curb. Through the rear window, she caught a final glimpse of Adrian on the hotel steps, composed under the glowing entrance lights, watching her depart. A surge of emotion swept through her, both exhilaration and caution. The city's streets blurred by, and she mentally replayed every conversation, every moment from the gala. The laughter with scholarship recipients, the hush of that dance, the unspoken understanding with the man who believed in her potential. Tension bubbled in her chest, a realization that her mentorship under Adrian might be wading into deeper waters, ones she wasn't entirely sure how to navigate. But she let those worries settle, at least for the night. In her clutch, she clutched a note with contact details from Simone, and the memory of Adrian's hand at her waist offered a strange kind of reassurance. Tomorrow would be another day at Morgan & Co., another chance to keep learning and keep forging her path. She gazed out at the passing buildings, a small smile forming. One thing was certain. Her accidental step into the wrong elevator had led her onto a road she could never have foreseen, but every turn so far felt like it carried a remarkable possibility, and that, for now, was enough to let hope bloom in her heart. Sunlight streamed through the tall glass panels of Morgan & Co.'s lobby as Natalie strode in the next morning, a subtle smile on her lips despite the lingering fatigue from the previous night's gala. She'd awakened with memories still tingling, the scholarship students' stories, her conversations with donors, and the unexpected moment on the dance floor with Adrian. More than once, she found herself running a hand along her waist, where he'd guided her so gently. It was both exhilarating and confusing. She exhaled a small breath as she reached the special elevator. "Don't overthink," she murmured to herself. "Focus on the work." Yet her heart beat a little faster as she recalled how Adrian insisted on sending a car for her, ensuring she returned home safely. There was no denying an undeniable pull between them, one she struggled to name. With a slight nod to the security guard, she keyed into the elevator that would bring her to the 65th floor. The gentle hum of the ascent allowed a moment to gather her thoughts. The apprenticeship still came first. She had meetings to attend, departments to shadow, and PR's final brand deck to present. Another hectic day lay ahead. When the elevator doors parted, Leonard greeted her in the reception area. "Good morning, Miss Jennings," he said, polite as ever. "Mr. Morgan asked me to let you know he'll be free in about 10 minutes if you can wait in the side lounge." "Thank you, Leonard," she replied, heading toward the smaller, more personal workspace adjacent to Adrian's main office. She'd only been in there once or twice, but it had quickly become a place she found calming. Books lined the shelves and sunlight cascaded through a side window, making the wood floors glow. Settling into the cushioned chair, she glanced around. The hush of the space felt companionable, like a waiting room between busy worlds. She allowed herself a moment to recall last night's events. The look in Adrian's eyes when they talked about the scholarship initiative, the gentle swirl of the dance. A soft heat rose to her cheeks and she shook her head to clear it. "I'm here to learn," she reminded herself firmly. "Anything beyond that?" "It's complicated." Footsteps approached. Adrian appeared at the threshold, his suit crisply tailored, hair neatly combed. Yet a faint softness lingered in his gaze, an echo of the warmth she'd seen in the ballroom. "Natalie," he said, voice low. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on in." She rose, following him into his main office. He closed the door, motioning for her to sit near the small coffee table rather than at his imposing desk. The morning sun lit the space generously, highlighting flecks of amber in his eyes as he studied her. "How are you feeling after last night? It was a long event." She settled into the chair, clasping her hands lightly in her lap. "Tired but good," she admitted. "The gala was eye-opening. Talking to Simone and the other scholarship recipients reminded me just how impactful the company's reach is, and it was my first time attending something so formal." His features softened in a near smile. "You handled it with grace. I noticed you engaged easily with donors, city officials, and our scholarship students alike." She nodded, heartbeat fluttering. I enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me. He leaned forward slightly. I meant every word I said. You need to see all angles of Morgan & Co., philanthropic and otherwise. But I also want to acknowledge— He paused, words measured. I appreciate your company last night, beyond the professional aspect. Her breath caught. For a charged moment, silence pulsed between them, filled with unspoken understanding. I did too, she said softly, meeting his gaze. A flash of something stirred in his eyes. Relief, perhaps, or caution. He inhaled. I'm aware of the lines here, Natalie, the mentorship, the power dynamic. I don't want any confusion to overshadow your growth. I hold your professional development in the highest respect. She nodded, a mix of gratitude and apprehension swelling. I feel the same. My role here, learning, contributing, means everything. I don't want to jeopardize that. He exhaled slowly. Then we're on the same page. His voice dropped, sincerity lacing every syllable. I've never had an apprentice whose presence felt so meaningful. It's not something I anticipated. Warmth flooded her chest, along with a cautious thrill. She realized they were dancing on a razor's edge, an unspoken bond that both pulled them together and demanded respect for boundaries. Yet hearing him articulate it validated the swirl of emotions she'd been wrestling with since that first accidental elevator ride. Adrian, she began, voice a bit unsteady. She hadn't fully formed what she would say, but she sensed it needed acknowledgement. I share that feeling, but I also know we have to be careful. He inclined his head. We do. Nothing about your path here should be clouded by rumors or complications. She recalled Jacob's guarded nature in operations, Trevor's joking insinuations in PR, and the broader corporate environment that thrived on gossip. I understand. They lapsed into silence for a moment, both absorbing what had been spoken. Finally, Adrian, with a slight shift of posture, returned to a calmer, more business-like tone. So, the brand deck. I hear from Trevor that the final version is impressive. I'd like a preview before the official presentation. She seized the change of topic gratefully, though her pulse still beat fast. Yes, absolutely. Sliding forward, she opened the slim laptop she'd brought. We refined visuals after discovering a licensing issue. We pivoted to a different skyline image, and I think it turned out stronger. The messaging aligns with the brand pillars you outlined. In a few clicks, she brought up the deck. Adrian stood, moving around to her side of the coffee table for a better look at the screen. His shoulder nearly brushed hers as they reviewed slide after slide, taglines, visuals, bullet points of data. She walked him through the logic behind each choice, occasionally glancing up to gauge his reaction. He nodded thoughtfully. Cohesive. It's consistent with the philanthropic narrative we showcased last night. Good synergy. Another slide. And this tagline for Region B. Did you come up with it? Heat touched her cheeks. I, suggested a short phrase, but Trevor added the polish. Adrian's eyes gleamed with a quiet approval. It's excellent, sharp, modern, speaks directly to that younger demographic. Her heart soared a little at his praise. She continued, pointing to a final slide summarizing next steps. We want to test these messages with local focus groups before full rollout, so we have a feedback loop. Smart, he murmured, leaning back. You've done well, Natalie. This reflects precisely the kind of adaptive thinking we need. They discussed a few minor adjustments, but overall Adrian seemed pleased. He jotted a note on his tablet. I'll give Trevor my official sign-off this afternoon. The board meeting next week will include a sneak peek. Be ready. They might want you there to speak on how the deck came together. Her eyes widened. Me? That's unexpected. He gave a wry smile. This apprenticeship isn't a passive shadowing. You're contributing, proving you can handle a leadership presence. I want them to see that. Nerves and excitement warred inside her. "I'll prepare then," she said softly. "Thank you." He closed his own notes, straightening. "All right, let's see. Your schedule today includes a midday check-in with HR, correct?" She nodded. "Yes, something about finalizing benefits paperwork. I also have a quick chat with Candace in finance to update me on any cost projections for the brand expansions." "Good. After that, you can circle back to PR or drop by operations. Jacob should be more relaxed now that his project launch is done." He paused, studying her. "And if you have time, I'd appreciate your thoughts on a separate philanthropic initiative we're researching, similar scholarships, but in another region." "I'd like that," she agreed, smiling. The memory of Simone's story still made her heart warm. "I'll find you once I'm done with HR and finance." He nodded, walking her to the door. As his hand touched the doorknob, he hesitated, turning back with a quieter tone. "Natalie, about what we discussed earlier, keeping lines clear. If I ever overstep or make you uncomfortable, please tell me." She looked up at him, touched by his caution. "I will. And likewise, if I do, I want us to maintain trust. Above everything." Their eyes held. Then, with a small nod, he opened the door, releasing her into the corridor. She stepped out, pulse still humming from their conversation. Leonard was at his desk, flipping through a file. He offered her a polite nod. She returned the gesture, crossing the reception area and entering the elevator. Going down, she stared at the mirrored walls. The reflection showed a poised young woman in professional attire, yet she felt all the swirling thoughts beneath that calm surface. A line had been acknowledged, an unspoken chemistry recognized. They'd promised to be careful. Yet she couldn't pretend the feelings weren't there. The elevator dinged on the 27th floor. She stepped into the finance realm, pushing personal musings aside for the moment. Candace greeted her warmly, and within minutes they were deep in spreadsheets related to brand expansion costs. The precision of finance tasks grounded her, forcing her to focus on calculations and projected budgets. It was oddly soothing to anchor herself in the tangibility of numbers. After an hour, she went to HR, completing the last bits of paperwork for her benefits. Health coverage, retirement plan details. "You've officially leveled up," one HR associate teased. "Full benefits from day one of your apprenticeship, Mr. Morgan signed off on it himself." She smiled at that, a quiet rush of gratitude. He was ensuring she felt secure here. Another sign of his generosity, or maybe the company's culture, or perhaps both. Finishing around noon, she checked her phone. Nothing urgent from Adrian, so she decided to pop by operations. Jacob had asked her to follow up once the chaotic project launch was past. She hopped down a floor, stepping into the sleek corridor that smelled faintly of fresh coffee and newly printed documents. Jacob was in his glass-walled office, but he looked up and waved her in. This time his expression was less guarded. "Natalie, come in. I've got a few minutes." She sat opposite his desk, noting the neat piles of files. "How's the project going?" He exhaled. "We hit the go-live date yesterday. Some minor issues, but overall successful. Thanks for giving us space. I heard you were busy with PR, the fundraiser, etc." She nodded, explaining briefly about the gala and the brand deck. "Adrian wants me to see how operations will coordinate with PR's new messaging, how products and timelines match the brand's global rollout." Jacob rubbed his chin. "Of course. We'll need marketing materials shipped on time, coordinate any specialized packaging, that sort of thing. Once PR finalizes their approach, we set the real deadlines. Shipping, production runs, promotional items. I can assign a liaison to keep you updated if you like." "Thank you," she said. "I'd appreciate that. Understanding the logistics is critical." She paused, recalling their initial wariness. "I'm glad we get to work more closely now that the crunch is over." A faint smile touched Jacob's lips. "Me too. You know, your presence worried me at first. but I see you're genuinely trying to understand, not just critique. That's refreshing. Relief coursed through her. I get it, no one wants a spy. But I'm here to learn so I can help in small ways, or at least not disrupt. He laughed. Precisely. All right, I'll send you an update next week about how we'll align with PR's campaign schedule. He checked the time. Anything else for now? She shook her head. That's all, thanks. I won't keep you. Standing, she parted with a cordial handshake. As she exited, she felt a sense of progress. Gradually, each department was coming to trust her presence. And if she impressed enough people, maybe her future at Morgan & Co. would be secure long after this apprenticeship ended. Shortly before 1 o'clock, her phone chimed. A message from Adrian. Free now if you are. Want to discuss the new scholarship concept and see if you have input from last night's insights. A quick flutter of excitement. She typed back, On my way. Returning to the 65th floor, she felt a subtle thrill remembering their earlier conversation. But she schooled her features, maintaining a professional composure. Leonard greeted her with the usual courtesy, and she stepped into Adrian's office where he stood near a bookshelf, a manila folder in hand. Ah, perfect timing, he said, ushering her in. Close the door if you wouldn't mind. We might talk sensitive details about funding. She did so, noticing he had a few documents spread on the coffee table. Is this about expanding scholarships to a new country? Yes. He placed the folder down. We've identified an underserved region that could benefit from a program like Simone's. But the political climate is tricky. We want to ensure funds aren't misdirected by local bureaucracy. She nodded, curiosity piqued. They sat on the couch side by side, and he showed her maps and charts of educational needs in that region. They discussed potential local partners, concerns about corruption, and ways to safeguard transparency. Adrian's approach was thorough, philanthropic giving that demanded accountability on the receiving end, ensuring real impact. A half-hour slipped by in intense focus, with Natalie offering suggestions gleaned from the previous night's conversations, especially how personal mentorship complemented financial support. Adrian seemed intrigued by her fresh angle, pairing each scholarship recipient with a Morgan & Cubber's contact who understood the cultural context. Your perspective is valuable, he said. You'd be surprised how many high-level execs overlook the human element. Dollars alone don't guarantee success. It's the relationships that do. She felt a small glow. Thank you. It's encouraging to know I can contribute meaningfully. He leaned back, crossing one ankle over his knee. You're exceeding my hopes for this apprenticeship, Natalie. The gentle sincerity in his tone stirred that now familiar warmth in her chest. In just a handful of days, you've jumped into PR, finance, operations, philanthropy, and made genuine connections. She blushed slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm trying my best to keep up. He exhaled, eyes drifting briefly to the window. You're doing more than that. Look, I meant what I said this morning. There's something about your approach. It's disarming. He paused, then refocused on her, voice gentle. You let people be honest about struggles. You show genuine care, and you see the bigger picture. Those qualities are rare. Her heart thudded, a soft swell of emotion flooding her. Adrian, she began, voice hushed. I'm grateful you see that in me. I never imagined I'd be part of something like this, yet here we are. Yes, he said simply. The moment stretched again. The air electric. Her hand twitched on the couch's cushion, fighting the urge to cover his. But she didn't. She remembered their caution. Sensing the tension, Adrian cleared his throat lightly, picking up the folder again. We'll refine these scholarship plans further. Maybe loop in Ms. Pryor next. Let's keep moving forward. She exhaled, a gentle smile. Absolutely. They closed the session discussing next steps, arranging a small working group, possibly visiting the region if all went well. Then he rose, signaling the end of the meeting. She followed suit. At the door, he paused once more. "Jacob asked if you could spend more time in operations next week," Adrian said. "He has a new timeline for the expanded branding campaign. Coordinating product shipments and marketing materials could be good practice for you." She nodded, reorganizing her notes. "Sounds great. I'll coordinate with him, and I'll keep in touch with Trevor in PR so we stay aligned." He extended a hand for a brief shake, an oddly formal gesture, yet it felt symbolic of the boundary they were upholding. She grasped it firmly, meeting his eyes. "Thank you, Adrian," she murmured. "I'll keep doing my best." A subtle squeeze, and he let go. "I know you will, Natalie. Until later, then." She slipped out into the corridor, heart pulsing with both satisfaction and longing. Every conversation with Adrian seemed to deepen a trust between them, and also the subtle undercurrent of an attraction they were carefully navigating. She took a steadying breath and headed toward the elevator, already planning her next tasks. That evening found her at home, flipping through the pages of a notebook where she jotted insights from each department. Her mind kept drifting to Adrian's quiet remark, "You're exceeding my hopes." She remembered the gentle light in his eyes, that moment when neither of them spoke, but everything felt charged. In her small studio's warm lamplight, she replayed the vow they'd made, to keep lines clear, to prioritize her development and the company's welfare. Yet she couldn't deny that her heart pounded whenever she recalled his kindness, or that dance in the gala's glow, or the private conversation in his office that morning. They were forging something special at Morgan & Co., a synergy that might outlast her apprenticeship. She closed her notebook, letting the thought settle. She didn't know what shape their relationship would ultimately take, but every day brought them closer, both in shared successes and shared confidences. For now, she decided, it was enough to embrace each day's lessons, to trust Adrian's guidance and her own instincts. Perhaps the future, with its promise and uncertainty, would unravel its path in time. She rose, tidying her notes. Tomorrow was a fresh day in that skyscraper, another puzzle piece in the tapestry of Morgan & Co., another step on the winding journey she'd begun so unexpectedly. She smiled softly, flicking off the lamp, feeling hope bloom within her once again. No matter what lay ahead, she was determined to keep learning, keep contributing, and keep faith in the remarkable connection that had sparked from one fateful elevator ride and continued to grow in ways neither she nor Adrian could have predicted. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen